It's 7 o'clock. Can you hear me? Calvin, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Good. So will you just key us in when we're ready, or what's the protocol?
Sorry?
What do we do? Just wait passively and wait for you to...
I'm not a panelist. I'm just, just a speaker. So,
Graham, we're going to wait for another 10 minutes before we start.
Okay. So we'll just wait.
For people to come in.
Understand.
Thank you.
You are up to date with ideas. Welcome to the world of webinar on cataract and refractive surgery. More than 50 speakers from across the globe. The WWCRS 2020 is the first of its kind. For 8 sessions in this 2-day extravaganza, the entire ophthalmic community bringing together the best of the best to keep you up to date with ideas from all around the world. WWCRS 2020, global names directly to your home starts now.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the WWCRS. Sergio and I couldn't be more happy to be presenting this world webinar to you all around the world. This past month and a half of webinars has been a culmination of sorts to lead up to this mega event. And we are more than humbled and honored to present this to each and every one of you audiences globally. We wish that you all are safe and sound in the comfort of your homes and offices, depending on time zones. We must thank each of our panelists and speakers personally to be a part of this event. A special mention to few companies and universities that have helped us gather troops to be here. Ophthalmo University, Elisa Company, Medaula, and Dr. Agarwal's Clinical Education. And the most important people of the hour, or let's say 2 hours, are moderators who went out of their way to get all our speakers and panelists involved in this big mega event called the World Webinar. The critical people behind this event that I must mention are Giovanni from Sergio's team, Ravi, Kumar, and Sanu from my team, who have not slept many nights to bring this event to us. Just to reiterate all the proceedings, we have loads of moderation, lectures, polling, panel discussions, technology stuff to talk about. But before that, I wish to inform you all that we are an all-live webinar, and hence we really need and want those questions to be coming in that Q&A chat. Remember again, the Q&A button that you see below is where you want to put all your questions in, because every session has a panel discussion that's meant only for the audience. Refrain from using the chat box because that just gets cluttered. Remember, there's no question that is silly and all questions want to be answered. This webinar is for you. Polling. To kickstart this event, let us now start with the first polling question, and I want my audience to answer this polling question to kickstart before we move on to the first session. Can we have the polling, please? And audiences, in IOL power calculation, I get uncorrected 20/20 vision in dash percentage of my patients post-operatively. Is it 50%, 70%, 85, or 95% and above? Be honest. Let's go, guys. We have 15 seconds to answer this question. And in 15 seconds, this window will close. Again, 20/20 vision post-operatively. How much percentage of patients get that for you guys? Can we close the polling now? And let's see the answers. Oh my God, that's beautiful. Now that's 85% people feel that they get 20/20 vision post-operatively uncorrected. Let's see if our new panel and moderators and speakers can get that to 95 and above with the IOL power calculation session. So can we have the introduction video, after which my moderators will completely take over the session. Sergio and I will be in the background.
Organizers. Sergio Canabrava, Brazil, and Ashwin Agarwal, India.
Hi, welcome everyone. Sergio and Ashwin, we're delighted to be here, and we're delighted to have such an amazing faculty. Hi, George.
Hi, Arthur. It's so wonderful to be here with you. And I just want to congratulate and thank Ashwin and Sergio for putting together really what's a monumental task. And we've got an all-star lineup for you. We're just so excited to kick it off. Arthur?
So we're first going to speak about Toric IOL calculation, and who better than Graham Barry to share that with us. Graham, thank you so much for joining and accepting our invitation, and it's up to you. Thank you.
Host has stopped my video. Can you hear me, Arthur?
We can hear you, Graham, yes.
It says the host has stopped my video. I'm trying to engage it.
Right, they will hear you too, and they'll get you going now.
Okay, but while we're waiting, thanks for the invite. Quite a new experience, and looks lots of fun. And
so Graham, if you perhaps just look to the right of your mute button, bottom left, there should also be a button saying start video, and just try that.
When I press it, I get the message, you cannot start your video because the host has stopped it.
Great, thank you.
So I'm waiting for the host. First speaker, first glitch.
Graham, can you share your screen? Can you share your screen?
I can share my screen, but
if you share your screen with the application, that'll open the...
Now it's gone. Is that working?
Yeah, you need to share the application here.
My video came on initially and
Last
someone stops it.
A particular application that you have? Are you using
I'm
PowerPoint
using Zoom.
or?
No, Zoom. I'm just trying to get Zoom on. I haven't got to the presentation yet. This is just trying to get my video for Zoom. Nothing complicated. Do you want to start with another speaker while you work out why my video was not working?
I think that's perhaps a good idea. So George, perhaps if you introduce our second speaker.
We're going to move on for the sake of time, and we're going to come back to Graham while we get that worked out. It's our pleasure to introduce our good friend and really leader in this area, Dr. Doug Koch from the Baylor College of Medicine in Houston, Texas, is going to speak to us about IOL selection in naturally occurring eyes. Doug.
Thanks so much. I'm trying to start my video, but it says the host has stopped it. So
it's the same thing I've got, Doug.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. I think it's supposed to go now. You're still,
So Doug, at the moment we can see you, and there's your, it's on now. That's great.
are we good now? Great. Okay, we're off and running in the World Webinar. This is great. I was asked to talk about IOL calculations and naturally occurring eyes. And what is a naturally occurring outlier eye? It's one that's either longer than normal, shorter than normal, has an abnormal anterior segment, or an abnormal cornea. So let's start with some good news. We're doing well with long eyes. We kind of started this whole topic with our Wang-Koch modification of axial length that we use with the Holiday 1 for those axial lengths, as you see, over 26.5, and that's the formula. And we recently looked at 1,664 eyes from Warren Hill's data set that had an axial length of over 25, and we hit 93% within a half diopter. And the good news is more than that, because Graham's formula is doing well with this now, and the Hill second version is doing well, and Tom Olson's formula also does well. So we have lots of great options for long eyes. Short eyes, though, are still a challenge. And we published a paper in 2017 comparing the formulas that you see there with the percentage within a half diopter ranging from 63 to 78%. And interestingly, the Holiday 2 and the Holiday 1 were the formulas that did best in our study. And the reason, of course, in the short eyes is that there's an ELP problem. You're putting a high-powered IOL in a small eye, and a small shift in position has a big refractive impact, unlike the long eye where you're putting a low-powered IOL in the eye. Warren Hill's updated the RBF to version 3, and I'll be interested to see if that will do better, because he's got a large number of small eyes in that data set. Nanophthalmos is the extreme version of the short eye, of course. It also has a small anterior segment. Everything is small and abnormal. And it requires implantation of an extremely high power IOL, when the formulas we've found can be off by 5 diopters or more. And very often the patient actually is less hyperopic postoperatively than you might expect due to the anterior position of the IOL in the eye. So this is a patient of mine who has retinitis pigmentosa and nanophthalmos. Her original surgery done in 2013, a 40 diopter lens was implanted, and she ended up with a refractive error of about +7, as you can see, and she had a lot of posterior and peripheral anterior sneaky eye. Surgery was complicated. So the left eye, she comes to me with a cataract, and so we decided to match the two eyes, because she was happy with her glasses, and remember that +7 gives her some badly needed magnification due to her retinitis pigmentosa. This is her Galilei. You can see a very steep cornea. This is her biometry, axial length 15.75, corneal thick is quite thick, the anterior chamber 1.8, lens thickness 5.14, the mean K is 52, and the white to white is 10.7, certainly a challenging eye for calculations. And what I've begun to realize is the key to success is less our biometry and less our formulas than the surgery. And I want to share with you the video of this surgery, a brief segment of it. I think the key in these eyes is to control the choroidal effusion and to do a cut down and create a scleral window right at the start of surgery, so that the posterior pressure does not drive everything forward either at the time of surgery or in the early postoperative period. I'm using a Kelly punch, and it's such thick sclera I can barely cut it with a Kelly punch. Now I'm putting Helon 5 in the eye, and it's still a lot of posterior pressure. You can see the bulge of the choroid, but that was just enough relief of the posterior pressure that I was able to complete the surgery well. And if we look postoperatively, these are the predictions of the formulas that we used. And at 1 month post-op, in fact, her refractive error was 5.75. She had a deep anterior chamber, no posterior sneaky eye. And in this particular eye, the Holiday 2 did best. But I think the point is, if you restore or maintain normal anatomy, your calculations will be better in these eyes. Keratoconus is an even bigger challenge. I want to thank Sumitra Khandelwal, who compiled this data set from 3 different sites, including ours. And you can see that along the x-axis is the mean SIM-K. This is the y-axis is the refractive prediction error using the Holiday 1. And you can see as the corneal power increases, the eyes become more and more hyperopic. But in that group up to about 50 diopters, we have a pretty good R-squared for this regression line. But beyond that, things fall apart as there's so much scatter in the data. And the calculations really show that the patients end up hyperopic, but unpredictably so. So how can we improve the outcomes? I'm thinking that perhaps ray tracing might be beneficial. I know Jaime Aramberry's done some work on this in keratoconus and shown some nice results. And there's a new keratoconus formula from Jack Kane in Australia. It'll be interesting to test that on a data set to see how it turns out. So in conclusion, naturally occurring outlier eyes, in those we're reaching a limit to our accuracy. We need to educate these patients about the limitations of our calculations. And this group, perhaps more than any other, we're going to need the possibility of postoperative modification of IOL power, which I think will play a major role. So thank you so much again for inviting me and for listening to my talk.
Thank you, Doug. That was fabulous. That's such a big topic, and did it so succinctly in 5 minutes is fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to go back to Graham Barrett now, and Graham's going to speak to us about the Toric IOL calculator. Graham, thank you.
Great, Arthur. All working. So I'm going to talk about toric lenses. These are truly one of the most important things that we have and has really made a change in our surgery. Now, to utilize toric lenses, we need to predict the lens, the toric lens. So we have various toric calculators. In principle, it's working out what the power of the cylinder is at the cornea, and with vector calculations, you can work out what toric lens is required to correct the astigmatism at the cornea. You can do it with a fixed LP, as was done with the original Alcon calculator. And if you look at the results, and here you see a fairly large series of about 600 eyes. I'll just move out the way, but you can see that the data is shifted to against the rule. It's about almost a half diopter against the rule error. The centroid error is not close to zero. What about if you have a calculator based on an ELP, which varies with each eye? This was suggested to be an improvement, but you can see it looks just the same. And in fact, the centroid error is all exactly the same, about half diopter. So that didn't fix the problem. And it's only when you use a calculator such as the AK regression or my own toric calculator, I'm not hiding yours, Doug, but you can see that the centroid now is close to zero. So utilizing the posterior cornea fixes that. I'm looking at another presentation now. Is that still working? So Doug reminded us of the importance of the posterior cornea, and there's various ways to do it by regression. My own method uses a theoretical model, which I developed to explain the phenomenon of posterior corneal astigmatism. And what's interesting, though, is that whether you use the toric calculator I developed either based on a predicted posterior cornea or the measured posterior cornea, it recognizes that the unexpected against the rule astigmatism, the difference between ocular and corneal astigmatism, is not just due to the posterior cornea. There's other factors at play, possibly IOL tilt. And so the toric calculators, both with predicted and measured posterior cornea, do account for this unexplained missing piece. And that helps the accuracy. Previous publications show that toric calculators using the posterior cornea, such as my own, and the AK regression have highly predictable outcomes. When you start looking at things like how the accuracy varies with toric cylinder, you can see that there are differences in the different toric calculators. And you see that as well when you look at different axial lengths. So for average axial lengths, the formulas, the toric calculators are very similar, but the differences become more manifest with short and long axial lengths. what's not really appreciated is that when you have a post-refractive patient, it's not adequate to use a standard toric calculator. You really need a calculator specific for post-refractive eyes. And this is available on the TrueK toric calculator. It has the K calculator where you can use 2 or 3 different devices and get a median K, vector K, and then provide a prediction. And both for sphere, but also for toric prediction, utilizing the measured posterior cornea improves the accuracy for spherical calculations in post-refractive eyes, but also in toric calculations. So I guess if there's one thing I'd like you to remember from this talk is that for post-refractive eyes, a standard toric calculator, even if it incorporates the posterior cornea, is not adequate. And you can see on a small group of patients, 23 eyes, but when you look at the comparison, you can see that the TrueK with the measured posterior cornea does somewhat better than the standard K. And that is not my experience with normal eyes. So I'm hoping that utilizing posterior cornea toric calculators and specifically utilizing toric calculators designed for post-refractive eyes will enhance our outcomes. It should be 5 minutes. And thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Graham. That is a beautiful presentation. I'm sure there are going to be many questions afterwards. Now it's my pleasure to introduce my good friend, Giacomo Savini, who I'd like to, he's looking very, very well. Giacomo has survived COVID-19 and is back working again. And Giacomo is going to speak about increasing predictability with IOL calculations. Thank you, Giacomo. Just unmute, Giacomo.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the invitation. And here I was asked to talk about increasing predictability of IOL power calculations. I would like to go on, but there's something. All right. Well, there are 3 essential requirements for accurate IOL power calculation. First, we need updated instruments. Second, updated formulas. And third, constant optimization. So we have a lot of optical biometers, more than 10 now. I don't want to talk about each of them. I just can say that there are no significant differences among the refractive outcomes based on the measurements of the optical biometers. We have shown this in different papers. As you can see from this table, more or less all biometers provide measurements that give similar refractive outcomes. Here you see some results around 85% of formula of eyes with a prediction error within half a diopter. And in this comparison, the Barrett formula compared to the oldest was slightly better. But this is not surprising because all manufacturers follow the measurements of the original IOL master from 1999 to be able to use the ULIP constants. So the problem probably is more focused on which formula we have to use to get the best outcomes. Back in 2011, we had only a few formulas that you all know, the Haigis, Hoffer-Q, Holiday 1 and 2, and ASSER-KT. Then in 2015, the Barrett, Universal 2, and Olsen became famous after some papers published their results. And now we have almost 20 formulas. And it's getting crazy because we have more and more formulas each year. So which one should we use? Well, if we still rely on old formulas, we may follow Hoffer guidelines confirmed by a big paper by Aristodemo, where you can use the Hoffer-Q for short eyes, the average of the 3 American formulas, the Holiday 1, Hoffer-Q, and ASSER-KT for medium eyes, the Holiday 1 for medium long, and the ASSER-KT for eyes longer than 26. The Haigis is valid in all groups. But now we have all these other formulas. More or less, they are all available for free on the web, all but nasal. They are unpublished, but we can easily reach them. And there have been several papers comparing them. Probably the most important up to now is the paper by Meles, because there are 13,000 eyes. And you see that the Barrett and Olsen formulas here on the top got the best outcomes with the 80 and 78% of eyes with the prediction error within half a diopter. We did a much smaller study using the Tomei optical biometer on a smaller sample, but with the same IOL model, and we got even better results, because you see that including almost all formulas, including even the newest one, we were between 80% and 90% of eyes with a prediction error within half a diopter. And more surprisingly, all formulas had more than 50% of eyes with the prediction error within a quarter of diopter. This is the ranking based on the prediction error within half a diopter, and you see that all these formulas are excellent: the EVO, the RBF, the Kane, Olsen, Holiday 2, T2, and Barrett. All formulas with optimized constants are still good, because you can still have 85% of eyes within half a diopter. And if you rank formulas based on the prediction error within a quarter of diopter, the two Australian formulas seem the best with 62% of eyes. So in my opinion, top formulas in 2020 are these: the Barrett Universal 2, the EVO 2, the Kane, the Olsen, and the RBF. The main problem is that it's very difficult to optimize their constants without the author's support, because all these formulas are unpublished. And without a constant optimization, their performance is not so superior to traditional formulas. And what about constant optimization? The constants provided by IOL manufacturers should be used only for the first few cases, then when a post-operative refraction is unknown. Constant optimization enables us to avoid systematic errors between the predicted refraction and the post-operative refraction. As you can see from this graph on the left, the constants are not optimized, and the mean error is here around 0.5, while when you optimize the constant, the mean prediction error becomes 0, and this is very important. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Savini. That was extraordinarily high-level talk that with just key pearls for all of us, and very well done. Thank you so much. Now it's our pleasure to conclude with Dr. Tom Olsen from Denmark. Thomas is going to present to us about IOL power prediction for post-keratorefractive eyes. Dr. Olsen, thank you for being with us today.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Thank you. It's so good to be here. Thank you for inviting me for this great event. I'm trying to share my my desktop, and it says you cannot start screen while other participants is sharing.
Giacomo, if you just please stop sharing on the top of your screen.
Oh yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Done.
So I'm still trying. I'm not seeing my thing. The organizer, could you switch me on something?
Thomas, are you able to share? Are you able to click that share screen button?
I want to share my presentation, and it doesn't show up. I don't know.
Have you opened the presentation in your
Yeah, yes, I have. Oh, sorry. Now I'm going back.
That's okay. I'll find it for you.
Yeah. Sorry for that.
No problem at all.
It should be on in a few seconds. All right.
There it is. Perfect.
Okay. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about lens calculation in post-LASIK corrected eyes. And I have to take you through some of the basics before we talk about the issues with these eyes. And as you know, the thin lens formulas work the way that you have a K reading and you have an actual length, and then you have an estimated lens plane position. And this is the basic formula common to all these thin lens formulas. And then you get the IOL power from that. In practical work, we have been doing like this, taking the K reading and the actual length, and then we get the IOL power. But behind the scenes, the formula is actually trying to guess where the lens ends up in the eye. And this is a very important step in any calculation, and it's even more important in the post-LASIK eyes. Well, the history of formulas is actually the first formula in the world was developed by Fjodor in 1967. And he devised a method by which you could calculate the lens position as a function of the radius of the cornea. And this principle was used by the SRKT and the Holiday formulas, and many formulas still use the K reading as predictive of the ELP for normal eyes. Now, the post-LASIK or the post-RK calculation, that's the challenge we're facing. The good news is that we do have the problem identified now. First of all, there's an abnormal Goulson ratio in these eyes. The Goulson ratio is a ratio between the anterior and the posterior surface of the cornea, and it's not normal in the excimer ablated eye. We also have difficulty measuring the exact central area of the cornea, whatever method we use. And then we have the wrong ELP estimation with some of the classical thin lens formulas. Here you can see the difference between a post-LASIK cornea and a post-RK cornea, and it does have implications for the way to correct for the corneal power. And you all know these awful topographic maps you see after some high correction of the cornea. And if you look at the corneal power distribution in these eyes, which one should you pick if you want to do an IOL calculation? That's really challenging. Now, forgive me for taking you back to the corneal power issue, because it's not just for the post-LASIK cases that we do have the corneal power issue, even in normal cases. Because what do you do if you have a K reading? You're just measuring the anterior surface of the cornea. And then you hope the posterior surface is related to the anterior surface in some constant relation. And then you get the combined power by doing paraxial ray tracing like this. And if you use the keratometer index of 1.375, you actually get a much higher value of the power than if you use the more physiological index of the cornea. Now, we do have methods to measure both surfaces of the cornea, and they're coming as we speak. There are different principles behind. You have the old Pupil technique, which has been redeveloped by the Cassini. We still have a lot of Scheimpflug images out there, and I think that's the most popular method by now. But then we are having the OCT technique coming, and I'm expecting a lot of fun with these techniques, because not only do they give very high resolution images, you can get a lot of other interesting metrics of the anterior segment of the cornea. I've had some experience with a pentacam, and the advantage of the pentacam is actually you can export the mapped elevation data from that instrument. That means you have the anterior surface and you have the posterior surface, and you can export these data, and you can import those data into an exact ray tracing system like the CMAX, which is an optical engineering system. And if you do that, as I did here, the cornea front, the cornea back, we put it on the ray tracing, and then we look for the point spread function as a function out here. You look for the minimum point spread function, that's the best focus. So you have the effective focal length of that cornea, and then you can get the effective corneal power of the cornea as well. And it's not depending on any assumption on the shape of the cornea, it's just based on the 3D elevation matrix. Here you can see the comparison. If we do compare the ray traced corneal power versus the K reading, and you note that the K reading is almost 1 diopter too high as compared with the ray traced cornea. Now, what about the ELP? For normal cases, we already know that the ELP is a major source of error in any formula, actually, and it's getting even worse if we're dealing with the post-LASIK cases, because many formulas still use the K reading as a predictor of the ELP. I told you the Fjodorov approach was the original, and still have the SRKT, the Hofer-Q, and some of the newer formulas are also using the K reading as predictive of the ELP. And it's getting a problem when we talk about the post-LASIK eyes. Now, I have devised a method to predict the exact IOL position after surgery. That's not the estimated lens plane, that's the physical position of the implant after surgery. And we did that by measuring the exact position of the IOL after surgery. Here you can see such a scan. That's the anterior surface of the cornea. That's the posterior surface. There's no doubt there's the IOL. And if you do that in a number of cases and plot the position of the IOL as the red dots in this graph, compared to the anterior capsule, that's the anterior chamber depth here, and the posterior capsule, that's the distance between the anterior and posterior surface, anterior and posterior capsule, that's the lens thickness. And you can see the IOL ends up in the middle of the capsule. That's no wonder, because I know I put it there, but there's a mathematical representation we can use. And here you see the representation of the C content, which is the ratio of the lens thickness predicting the position of the center of the IOL. So we have actually got rid of the K rating and the actual length dependence, and we have replaced the predicting of the IOL by the ACD and the lens thickness. As you can see here, that's a C constant. And it's not depending on a K rating. That's a great advantage if we talk about the post-LASIK cases. Now, if we don't do anything, we just do business as usual, you know you get a lot of error in these eyes. Here I have calculated what would the error be if we had an ablation of -6. You get, with the SRKT, almost 2 diopter hyperopic error after surgery. Half of this error is due to the K rating problem, and half of this error is due to the ELP estimation problem. The solution is, of course, get the cornea right, and you should get the ELP right. So the ELP, I would say we can have an unbiased ELP prediction according to the C constant. I like to do that in post-LASIK cases. What about the corneal power? I like to do a tomography where I get both surfaces of the cornea, and then I want to do a ray tracing. Some of the instruments actually report the ray traced corneal power to you. For this session, I collected the data of 74 eyes, and you can see they had a ablation ranging from -6 to -14. That's quite a lot in some cases. And we did lens star, pre-op biometry, and pentagram. And here you see results. With our method, we have around 0.5 diopters in mean absolute error in these cases, 61%, something like that, less than a half diopter. It's better than the Shamas and the Heikis, and it's also somewhat better than the Putnam Hill reported some years ago. So, and here you see the summary in a graphical display. If you use the pentagram data, you actually get better results, and that was also used by the Putnam Hill. And if you use ray tracing, as I described to you, we get even better results. So the good news is we do have identified the errors with the post-LVC cases. I would say the ELP issue can be solved if you use the C constant. And I like to use full thickness corneal measurements. And in these cases, they work maybe even better than in normal cases. Thank you very much. Remember one thing, the calculation is never a magic thing if you know what's behind the scenes. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Thomas. That was brilliant, and just such a wonderful way to close out our truly all-star panel. I'd like to thank every one of you. That was just tremendous and exceeded our expectations for sure. We have now a panel discussion opportunity where we have questions pouring in from around the world. And I'm going to start with the first one with Doug. We had at least, we have a handful of questions asking for definitive guidance on what is the preferred formula for short, very short, that is very short and very long eyes. Doug, would you mind coming up on your video, and maybe you could address that since that was your talk.
You know, I hope you can hear me. I don't think we have the answer yet. I think we're still learning, and all of the good formulas like Graham's, Warren Hill's, and so on are being modified and improved as they build their database. Our study showed that the Holiday 2 actually came out slightly better than the others, but I run the Barrett, the Hill RBF, and I'm looking forward to the Hill RBF 3, and I'm going to try the Cane, and ray tracing is an interesting possibility. I wonder how the C constant will work with that. Maybe Tom has an answer. I don't think we have the answer, and we're still working on it.
Thank you, Doug. In fact, Doug, there's another question for you, and that was specifically, what do you suggest when the case is steeper than 55 at the moment? What would you suggest? What formula?
Well, if the Ks are steeper than 55, the first question is whether or not they're going to wear a contact lens. Because if they're going to wear a contact lens, or if they're potentially a candidate for penetrating keratoplasty, which may often be the case, then I'd probably put a lens in that would make them use around 46, which would be the typical post-keratoplasty corneal power reading. Otherwise, if they're really going to remain wearing glasses, I would aim for about -3 with a K over 55, and I think that puts them in a reasonable ballpark with a huge standard deviation, though.
All right, thank you very much. We have another speaker too who has asked, and I'll open this to the panel, is how do you modify the formulas when you're treating a patient with an epiretinal membrane? Anyone want to give an answer for that?
Well, I don't want to hog the microphone, but we don't modify it at all because the optical biometers don't measure to the anterior retinal surface. So I don't think that you could modify it thinking that the refraction might be different, but we actually don't.
Graham, can I ask you a question? You've got a lot of fantastic work on toric IOLs altogether, but one question that has come up is, sometimes astigmatism is not particularly a bow tie. How do you then make a decision on toricity?
Sure. Unfortunately, especially with low levels of astigmatism, the pattern can be quite variable, Arthur, and not unusual to have some form of asymmetry. My routine to make sense of those unusual corneas is the K calculator using 3 devices. It gives me my best shot. If you ignore it and say, well, look, this is too hard, that's a trap. You will get astigmatism. So it doesn't stop me from doing in less than perfect conditions. I will still do a toric. I think it's better than not doing it. I mean, if you've got a totally deranged cornea, sometimes you've got to throw your hands up, but that's very rare. So most corneas don't have a perfect bow tie. I mean, those of us that do lots of torics will know that, and especially as you lower your limit of intervention for torics, some sort of asymmetry, non-orthogonal is not uncommon at all. It doesn't mean you can't use torics though. My method is somewhat dumb. I just do what the K calculator tells me. I've been through looking at it and guessing and fudging, and it's too hard and it's too subjective. You have good days, you have bad days. I don't think that's reliable enough. But I find the median K often gives me the best result.
I think that's very good advice. It just makes it straightforward for everyone. And if they do find over time they're making a systematic error, they can maybe modify their own, sort of the way you do with a laser nomogram. But people will be very reassured that you specifically are going with what the devices are telling you. So that's very valuable. Thomas, can I ask you a question? What do you do if you're treating toricity and you don't have the posterior Ks?
Right, toricity. Well, there are many formulas out there where you can actually use a nomogram, or you can use your own regression method or whatever. And I have to admit that we did our own, let's say, regression method, where we actually watched for the outcome in a number of cases without a toric implant. So you got the refractive outcome in a number of cases with lenses without a toricity, And if you take these cases and you measure the anterior surface of the cornea, you have the anterior case, and you make the regression analysis on the refractive outcome, then you get actually what is the posterior surface of the cornea. And I think it's very similar to the Graham method or some of the other methods. So that's what we do actually. And we compare that with some of the best known formulas. And I think they work quite good. The amazing thing is that I would expect that exact measurements would do the job. But often you are disappointed. So when you use the Pentacam or you use any other device to get the posterior astigmatism exact, it's not always working the way that you want it to work. I wonder if that's just still a measurement error issue or there's more to it. I'm looking forward to better methods for the posterior astigmatism. Then I think we can use measurements better than we can today.
All right, fantastic. Thank you so much. We're going to have to close out. So I'm going to leave the last word to you, Giacomo, because you gave a talk on how to make it more accurate. Would you want to give the last word in maybe a minute, just on how you could summarize what you've heard so far and how we can make these IOL measurements more accurate? And to all the panelists and the speakers, thank you so much.
Well, I think that we need to use maybe more than one biometer to see that the measurements are accurate and similar, so we don't have differences in K and axial length. And I think we need to look at what is available on the printout, and in this time on my machines I'm lucky enough to have the Olsen and Barrett formula to look at, so that I don't have to go on the website. They are automatically printed. But if I have very difficult cases with strange numbers, I'm not talking about keratoconus, I'm just talking about regular eyes, I also take a look at Kane and EVA and RBF. I think these 5 are the best formulas today.
Thank you so much. Ashwin and Sergio, we're going to shut the session. Thanks to all the speakers. A great session. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, guys. Thank you. In this exactly moment, we have more than 2,000 people in the 3 channels, website, YouTube, and here. And your session, more than 3,000 people watching you. Thank you to be here with us. It's such a pleasure to be here. And let's moving on now the session 2. But before, I have a video for my friend for Ireland, Dr. Arthur. A question and a video for you, please. The question for the audience is, what technology are you looking forward to the most in the post-COVID era and why? Please, Arthur, your question for us, your answer.
LYRIC, laser-induced refractive index change, which can non-invasively alter the refractive properties of the human cornea. This must be one of the most exciting technologies that any refractive surgeon could imagine. It really sounds like science fiction. LYRIC can change the refractive power without changing the corneal shape or without changing the corneal thickness. And it has potential to work on an IOL too, allowing one to fine-tune a missed refractive target. LYRIC is performed at a wavelength of 405 nanometers, which is at the blue end of the visible spectrum. At this wavelength, LYRIC is a 2-photon absorption process, resulting in highly localized refractive index changes. Within the laser focus volume, instead of removing or disrupting tissue, LYRIC alters collagen fibril density. LYRIC is relatively non-invasive in that it uses pulse energies that are 100th to 1,000th those used to greater femtosecond laser flap. This looks like the future. Why? Being able to improve vision without ablation, without cutting, without photo disruption.
Arthur, thank you. And now let's move on for the polling question. Please, Javi, the polling question. Okay, guys, here the polling question, please, about IOL premium. Please, you have 50 seconds to answer this question. the next session. All panelists and speakers and coordinators coming on. After the answer to the question, it's a pleasure. Dr. Armia, pleasure to see you here.
Hi, Sergio, how are you?
Okay, please, Javi, let me show the results. Hello, guys. Number one, 59%, an IOL, that is the 3 measured target visual points. Okay, guys, please, the session video to introduction this great team that we start now, and thank you again to be here. Hello, Kathleen, Ivo, Laureano. Let's go to start the video.
Premium IOL session. The coordinators, Ronald Kruger and Ashraf Armia. Guest panelist, Ivo Ferreira, Uruguay. Featuring speakers, Kathleen McCabe, USA. Florian Krebs, Germany. Laureano Rementeria, Spain. And Sharos Daya, UK. Organizers, Sergio Canabrava, Brazil, and Ashvin Agarwal, India.
Ashraf?
Yes. Yes, Ashwin. Ashwin, do you hear me?
Ashraf, you're muted.
No, I'm here. I'm not muted.
We can't hear you, Ashraf.
I can hear you.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, do you hear me?
Absolutely.
Excellent. Hello, everyone, and I'm happy to be here in this great webinar. I'm so pleased to coordinate this session with Ron and Ivo. It's our pleasure. Thanks for the great work of Ashwin and Sergio to make this session great. Is Kathy with us?
I'm here.
Yeah, hi Kathy, how are you?
Hi.
It's our pleasure. So we are going to introduce Cassie, one of the biggest surgeons all over the world and one of the eminent in premium cataract surgery. She's going to talk about the new Alcon EDOF lens, the Viventi and the Panoptics. Here, Kathy, how are you?
Thank you very much. And this has been such a wonderful meeting so far. I want to congratulate Ash and Sergio and everybody. I've learned so much already and already taking great notes. So I'm going to talk to you today about the Vivity, which is a new EDOF lens, and the Panoptics, an advanced trifocal that we just recently got in the United States. So everybody wants premium outcomes for our cataract patients. And in this new normal, it's even more important for us to have independence, both for our patients and for providers. Vivity, which is an EDOF with a monofocal-like visual disturbance profile that does not split light and is an available solution for patients who are not ideal candidates for trifocals, and the Panoptics, which is an advanced trifocal with excellent distance, intermediate, and near vision, are both great solutions to make this happen. So if you ask surgeons, why don't you implant a presbyopia correcting lens? The most common reason will be visual disturbance complaints from patients that we're trying to avoid. So that's where Vivity comes in. It's a new extended range of vision monofocal lens. You can see it here. It has a very subtle optical element in the center of the lens that provides an extended range of vision. It's an ACE. It has a visual disturbance profile that's comparable to the monofocal aspheric SN60WF. And meanwhile, mesopic contrast sensitivity is preserved. So here is a diagram on the right where you can see that central 2.2 millimeter wavefront optic. What it does is stretch the wavefront in front of it and behind the retina, and it shifts the hyperopic side to the myopic side. So in doing so, it also avoids light splitting, which is why you get such a wonderful visual disturbance profile. So if you look at the light intensity distribution for a monofocal lens, you get sort of this focal point at distance. And a diffractive EDOF lens will have a light intensity dip here in the middle. But with this wavefront shaping technology, you get a more continuous extended focal range with light intensity distribution. So I was part of the pivotal clinical trial data for the FDA from the US study, and there was a parallel OUS study that was performed. And the binocular defocus curves from those studies showed this improvement in the intermediate and near range for this Vivity lens. And you can see excellent distance vision was preserved, but improvement both at the 60 centimeter and 40 centimeter distances. And then if you distance correct, you still maintain those differences. So it wasn't a mini monovision type situation. And this is really the key point for this lens. It has a visual disturbance profile that's similar to the monofocal lens. And if you see on the right, you'll see that actually numerically, and this was borne out in all the studies and in our site study as well, numerically, it was actually better than the monofocal lens for starburst and glare, and halo is about the same. So it was interesting, you know, if our reason for not putting in a premium lens in a patient was some sort of compromise is that you don't want to split light and you don't want to have unwanted visual disturbances. With this data, it's hard to make an argument for not using a Vivity in those cases. So the Vivity gives distance, intermediate, and functional near, not as good near as a trifocal lens. It has a monofocal-like visual disturbance profile, or maybe numerically even better in starburst and glare. And it does this with wavefront shaping technology that stretches and shifts the wavefront. So let's talk about patients who really want independence from their near vision. We have PanOptix, and the reason it's an advanced trifocal is because the intermediate is actually at 60 centimeters rather than the normal 80 centimeters. And 60 centimeters is a more usable distance for intermediate vision. It's actually what OSHA says. You should put your laptop or your desktop monitor should be at 60 centimeters for most comfortable use of your monitor. So 88% of the light energy is transmitted. It has a 4.5 millimeter central optic. 50% of the light is distance, and then the remainder is split equally between intermediate and near. And look at this binocular defocus curve, just a nice flat curve where you get quality of vision at all distances. Really a big difference when you compare it with the monofocal lens, big improvement in intermediate and near. The visual disturbance profile is different than a monofocal, so that's the difference with Vivity. Get better near, but you do have to have a discussion with patients that they may see some halos and glare at night. But overall, great satisfaction with this lens. 99.2% would have the same lens again. So in my hands, future premium lens offerings for visual independence are going to be either PanOptix bilaterally for patients with healthy eyes who are able to tolerate a potential for visual disturbances at night, especially who desire independent near vision. If they're compromised in any way, not an ideal candidate for a trifocal lens, they have pathology, they just won't tolerate visual disturbances, great. We have Vivity, which will give them a monofocal-like visual disturbance profile with an improved range of vision. Or what I'm holding out for some of my patients, they have a healthy eye on one side, not so healthy on the other, maybe something I'm a little bit concerned about in the future, maybe Vivity in that eye, a PanOptix in their healthy eye, or maybe mini monovision with Vivity to improve their near. So I want to thank everybody, and thanks for including me in this wonderful panel, and what a fabulous meeting. Congratulations, Sergio and Ash.
Thank you, Kathy, so much. Ron, are you here? Can you stop sharing, please, Kathy?
Yes. Yeah. Let me just find where I do that. There we go.
Yes, excellent. Ron, you are here?
He is.
Okay, Ivo, how are you?
Hello, yes, I'm here.
Yeah.
Tedley, congratulations. Congratulations.
Okay, I'm here, Ashraf.
Amazing job.
Hi, Ron.
So our next speaker is going to be Ashraf Armia, who's going to talk about bioptics and pinhole pupilloplasty.
Thank you, Ron. Is my screen clear? Do you see my screen, yeah?
Yes, your screen's on.
Okay. So when I talk about this topic, I usually do the toric for most of my cases, but I came to this idea maybe since 6 months that I'm using two refractive type, the pupilloplasty and the bioptics. The idea came to me. I have to give the credit to Ashwin and Priya for this pinhole pupilloplasty. This patient came to me. She is a female Syrian, age 36, for a refractive correction for her right eye. On examination of the right eye, I found that she had an iris globoma about 3 o'clock hours with normal posterior segment. Her psychoplegic reflection was +7 sphere, -5 cylinder, and with best corrected visual acuity was 0.4 with +6 sphere and 4.5 cylinder. Her left eye was perfect with no significant error, so I asked for a pentacam for a femto LASIK correction. When I have the pentacam, I was not happy with this pentacam. The steepening of the cornea was not, I didn't like it. It's more steep in the upper and less in the lower. I didn't feel it okay. When I look to the other parameters in the pentacam, I'm not happy. And also there is some posterior elevation. So I told the patient that I don't want to do a cornea refractive surgery. We are going to do another way of correction of the refraction. So my decision was a Toric IOL, which is the high toric, with pinhole pupilloplasty as a premium refractive correction. This is the procedure. As you know, all known in iris globoma, the zooms are not easy going. So I opened the rexus, the capsule with the needle first. And the most important in these cases that you do a good central rexus, which is very important in toric IOLs, not too large and not too small rexus, but you should care that you do it in the right central way. After you finish, this is a soft lens. Usually you inject the Helon, and I usually use the CTR in these high toric lenses and also in iris globoma. I have some struggle in the CTR, but finally I put it, but I move it inside the bag, as you see, away from the area of the zonular. I marked the corneal stigmatism, and I put the lens. The most important also in these cases, when you do pupilloplasty, you must remove all the viscoelastic behind the IOL because you are going to close the pupil. I injected pilocarpine to close the iris. Very important, I'm going to stop here. Very important when you start doing this. This is the normal pupil. And this is the end of this, and this is the end, and this is the colobone. So when you take the first bite, you should start at this point and this point, because this is the first and most important suture you are going to do because to have a good size rounded central pupil. Very important. I'm using the 4-through pupilloplasty, which is my technique now since many years, to close it. You have a good size of the pupil, and I take 2 to 3 another iris suture to close all the coloboma. And after you finish, you move to your viscoelastic, and you continue. You have a well-centered pupil. Surprisingly, post-operatively, this is what I was before the operation and the correction of the patient. But surprisingly, I found that the best corrected visual acuity of the patient became 0.8 with plus 0.25 sphere and minus 5.5 cylinder, which is improving due to this idea, because the idea of the technique is performing pinhole pupiloplasty helps filter the stray light from the periphery of the cornea in cases of high order corneal aberration. It blocks the distorted and unfocused light, reducing the aberration and enhancing the visual acuity and its image quality. The pinhole devices mitigate the impact of corneal abrasion, and also it improves the visual acuity of the patient. So my home take message in these cases, what I'm usually doing a lot, especially in post-keratoplasty procedures or high intractable corneal astigmatism, achieving the pinhole effect by narrowing down the pupil size. The pinhole pupiloplasty significantly improve the visual acuity in patients with high order corneal abrasions by allowing the passage of the light through the central pinhole area, but also take care that the Purkinje image is a useful step helping to locate and create a central pupil. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you, Ashraf. We're next going to go on to the next speaker. Dr. Rementeria is going to speak a little bit about astigmatism with toric IOLs.
Okay. Good afternoon. And let me share my screen. Okay. So good afternoon, and thanks, Dr. Calabrava and Dr. Armina, for your kind invitation. It's an honor for me to be here. So did you know that according to the American Society of Cataract and Refractive Surgery in 2018 survey, 95% of participants believe that clinical significant astigmatism should be corrected. And yet, only 20% of these astigmatic patients receive a toric IOL. And in Europe, it's even worse. Only 11% of these astigmatic patients receive a toric IOL. How can it be? After this presentation, I want you to see and treat more and more patients. I want you to feel confident managing astigmatism, and I want you to know that trifocal and trifocal toric IOLs, when they are well implanted, are the same. They are exactly the same. Here we have the three main topics that we are going to talk about. First, the demographic distribution of astigmatism. Second, what we do and what we use in our practice. And third, the evidence-based medicine results. Here we have the demographic distribution of astigmatism. As you can see, 36% of patients have astigmatism between 0.25 and 0.75 diopters. But look at this. 70% of patients have astigmatism between 0.50 and 3 diopters. That is treatable astigmatism. What we use in our practice is these two trifocal toric IOL platforms. One is Panoptix from Alcon, and the other one is Ray 1 from Briner. Both are diffractive, and the biggest difference between these is the intermediate addition. In Panoptix, you have 2.17 diopters, and in Ray 1, 1.75. The light distribution, spherical and torical range are very similar. Another thing that we can use to correct astigmatism is these two IOLs implanted in piggyback. We have here a monofocal toric in the back IOL, and we are now implanting a trifocal in sulcus. So with these two IOLs implanted in piggyback, we can correct astigmatism and we can provide the trifocality to our patients. Another device that we use every day in our operating theater is this guidance system called Barium from Alcon. And the only thing that you have to do is to align the toric marks of the IOL with this big green line in the middle of the video. As you can see, the Barium, it's always following the eye movement, so it's easier for the surgeon. Here in number 3, we have the evidence-based medicine results. And this is a paper that we published in the Journal of Cataract and Refractive Surgery in November 2019. And we compare Panoptix and Panoptix toric. Toric IOLs were implanted in patients with 1 or more diopters of corneal astigmatism. Here we have the binocular defocus curves. And as you can see, from far to near, included intermediate, visions are really good. And both platforms are very similar. Here we have the binocular photopic contrasensitivity. And again, both platforms are very similar and the results are really good. Here, in difficulty in performing day-to-day activities, this graphic is represented in log scale. So the lower the graphic, the better the vision. We have in items like number 6, seen to walk on uneven surfaces, they are not similar, they are the same. And also in items like number 4. In the rest of items, the difference between these two platforms are very, very low. So before I finish, let me summarize. You know now that over 70% of patients have treatable astigmatism. You know now that it's easy to manage if you use the correct devices. And with the evidence-based medicine results, you can be relaxed. So with all those patients out there having astigmatism who wants to be treated, I want you to see and treat more and more patients. Now you know that it's easy to manage, so I want you to feel confident managing astigmatism. And with the evidence-based medicine results, you know now that trifocal and trifocal toric IOLs, when they are well implanted, are the same. They are exactly the same. Thank you, doctors, for your invitation, and thank you very much for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rementeria. Ashraf, any comment?
No, not yet. We'll take my dearest Shiraz. Hi, Shiraz. You finished your other part, and welcome here again. Shiraz is going to give a talk about the artist symposium lens mix and match by design.
You're mute. Okay.
Hi, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not sure if you're able to see my slides at all. Can you see them?
Yes, clear.
We can see them.
All right. Am I in the right? To make sure I'm using two screens, so it can be a bit of an issue sometimes.
Can we make it full screen?
I'm trying. There we go. Have you got it?
Excellent.
So
Looks great.
You're not seeing all the other rubbish, are you?
No.
Okay, great. Well, thanks very much for inviting me to participate in this all-star cast of refractive and cataract surgery, in particular premium IOLs. It gives me great joy to talk about the Artis Symbiose lens, which is a lens from France, and I've called this mix and match by design because that's how it's been promoted. I'd like to acknowledge my wife, Marcela, and our technicians for putting the data together. These are my financial declarations. I am a consultant for Crystal Lens, who manufacture the lens, and I'll also be speaking about some from Barcelona. So when we're looking at trifocal lenses, as you've heard, the intermediate is the issue that we're trying to address. In spite of that, these are a series of different trifocal lenses. You still have a bit of a dip in the intermediate range. And the question is, how does one address this? And this is the Artis Symbiose lens. I'm not going to go through all the details, but they are different. There's one lens which is a mid, which they're both trifocal. One is geared towards mid distance, and the other is called a plus for near. And they have different numbers of rings. And the intermediate lens is placed in the dominant eye, and the near lens in the non-dominant eye. And this basically works on a concept of continuous phase. So when you take a look at the point spread function, you transform it to do a Fourier transform, you get the optical transfer function, and you break that down further. You have the MTF, and you also have phase transfer function. And where there's where the phase is negative, there's a visual degradation. And this is from Tipos' paper showing phase inversion, what it can do to an image in an eye with optical aberrations. Now with continuous phase, this is an S, a simulated S with phase inversion, and this is when phase has been corrected. So when it's been corrected, you actually see the S. You do have some other images around it from the other optical components. And the goal here is to eliminate this dip that we see in trifocal lenses, which causes a problem for the image. Now, patients do neuroadapt, and they can see this, but it can be problematic, and it can take some time. So the combined lenses together, the goal is to give continuous vision right the way through, with emphasis for near in one and mid in the other. And this is simulation of what that looks like on modeling of a trifocal lens versus Symbiose. So we did a study to look at the influence of continuous phase on defocus and whether the two lenses differed in performance and whether they did indeed complement each other. And this is a 100-eye study, bilateral, in 50 patients. And as I say, we put the mid in the dominant eye and the plus in the non-dominant eye. And all the procedures were done using 1.8 mm incision and femtosecond lasers. You can see the lens going in right here. Viscoelastic is being removed, and you'll see it centering very well inside that nice round capsular excess. All patients who had astigmatism above, were 0.75 and above, were treated with limb relaxing incisions. At 6 weeks, we did the usual tests, and including defocus and also contrast sensitivity. And this is the mean age group of 63 years. There were more females than males. This is the preoperative spherical equivalent and postoperatively, and also the astigmatism preoperatively and postoperatively. Looking at breaking them up into the two different lenses, you can see that they actually didn't differ too much in terms of preoperative refraction and outcome, nor did the cylinder. Looking at refractive outcomes, this is what was quite interesting. In the mid group, 92% were within half a diopter, which is really good. And in the plus group, 91% within half a diopter. So again, fairly equivalent. What's interesting though is in the mid group, this is the dominant eye, only 21% gain 1 line or more of vision. Whereas in the plus group, and remember we're talking about cataracts and refractive lens exchange, 45% gained 1 line or more, which is significant. The predictability was good in both cases, as I've already illustrated. And this is uncorrected distance visual acuity. The blue bars are the mid lens, and the plus bars are the orange bars are the plus lens. And you can see this, as you'd expect, distance vision is good in both and comparable in both. And when looking binocularly, they do even better, with 81% getting 20/20 vision at 6 weeks. Now looking at near vision, you'd expect the plus to do better. There's the orange bars, and they did indeed, had the slight edge. And binocularly, even better still. At 60 centimeters, now this is intermediate, you'd expect the mid to do better. That's the blue bars. And they didn't, which was surprising. The plus did better. And cumulatively, they did very, very well. And patients were very pleased. And they did even better at 80 centimeters. Again, both lenses were equivalent at 80 centimeters. And 95% saw 20/20 at 80 centimeters. This is the defocus curve of one patient showing the plus in red, the mid, and cumulatively, showing benefit there. Contrast sensitivity, and this is the plus, and this is the mid. So the mid has slightly better contrast sensitivity. These are defocus curves of the plus and the mid, and both eyes open. And you can see there was no real dip. There was a slight dip in the mid at -0.5, but overall the lenses seem to perform fairly equivalently. Any complications? 2 eyes had macular edema, and this improved with treatment. This is in one patient. There were no explantations. One was decentered, but the vision was 20/20 at all distances, so we didn't intervene. And 2 patients spontaneously reported a reduction in near vision from the eye, the dominant eye, which had the mid lens. So in conclusion, the continuous phase definitely improves. It flattens out. There are no dips on the lenses, and patients did not complain about intermediate vision at all. And they adapted very rapidly. Do the 2 lenses perform a different performance? Yes, they seem to. The plus performed better at all distances. And do the 2 lenses complement each other? Well, there's no clear evidence that this is the case at 6 weeks. And the performance of the plus, we're now doing a study where we're putting the plus in both eyes, and we'll evaluate the defocus curves and contrast sensitivity. Thank you for your attention.
Okay, thank you, Shiraz. Just a quick question to you, Shiraz. When do you choose this lens selection compared to other multifocal scenarios?
Well, we do trifocal lenses in 95% of our patients. I don't do mini monovision and any of the other things. I like to keep my chair time as low as possible. So we do a lot of them. And we were doing this in a sort of audit study situation, and the lens power comes into it's a very finite range, unfortunately. They're going to expand it, and they brought a toric version out. I think it's coming out soon. So as that expands, I'll be using this lens much more of the time. We've been using the Physiol lens. The hydrophobic is also an excellent lens. And it'd be useful to compare the 2 lenses. And that's another project going forth. What I want to do is validate that what they said on the box really was the fact. And I've discovered something that's a bit different from the other investigators. So we're going down a different route, but it'd be very interesting to see what the outcome's like. Overall, adaptation is very good, and patients don't complain that much about halos and glare compared to the others. So they take to the lens very, very quickly, very, very satisfactorily.
And do you have any criteria as to who you would select for, say, a Physiol lens versus this lens?
Not really. I think if they're intermediate activities, so if they're a music conductor, I'd probably favor this lens over the Physiol. But that would be about the only difference, really.
Okay.
They're all very good lenses.
Very good.
Kathy, yes. Kathy, you have a question. Which, given Vivint, what would you advise in cases of chronic open-angle glaucoma for stable vision?
Yeah, I think that's exactly where Vivity fits perfectly, is patients who have stable pathology. Maybe they have some drusen, but you don't know what's going to happen in the future. They have a small epiretinal membrane that's not right at the fovea, but you're worried that maybe that will degrade their quality of vision in the future. They have stable open angle glaucoma, you know, things where you think that maybe I would be concerned in the future. I see my patient back 5-10 years from now and regret that I put in a trifocal or a diffractive optic. Those are the perfect cases for Vivity, I believe.
And what about your pupil size when you choose the Vivint? You look for the pupil size?
For Vivity, and
Yes.
also for other multifocal lenses, I really don't look at pupil size too much. And really even with PanOptix, with that 4.5 millimeter diffractive optic now, I don't really think so much about pupil size. So I don't think that that's much of an issue. Really small pupils that are only where that 2.2 millimeter are getting a pinhole effect anyway. So yeah, I don't think that's an issue.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, sure.
We evaluated pupil size before surgery and after surgery, and there was no correlation at all. Everybody got a smaller pupil after surgery, and the mean was 4.2 millimeters. A lot of it depends on how much the iris is hung up by the lens and how intumescent the lens might be in terms of the cataract. So I don't think I know there's no correlation at all between pre-op pupil size and post-op. So you're probably using information that should be disregarded preoperatively if you are using pupil size, for the audience out there.
Very good point. There was a series of questions for Ashraf about the pinhole pupilloplasty. How do you actually do it? Does it affect visual field or dilated fundus exam? Why use a toric lens if you're using a pinhole pupil? Do you need that? What are some of the thoughts on that?
Yes, I usually, when I do the pupilloplasty, I don't go for more than 3 millimeter pupil size. I don't go for less than this because this 3 millimeter, it is the size that I can see the fundus very clearly, and also the posterior segment can work easily with the posterior segment biome. Why I used the Toric IOL? Because the Toric and the pinhole, because I wanted to have the best stability of the vision and the highest contrast sensitivity for the patient. Because if I'm going to leave the iris glaucoma in young patients and I'm going to do Toric, there will be halos more than the normal lens of the normal patient. So I wanted to have a good size of the pupil to maintain the good depth of focus.
Okay. There was another question here for Kathleen about when doing the Vivity neutral in dominant eye, and do you do a slightly myopic endpoint in the non-dominant eye to achieve all distances, or is it just go for distance in both eyes?
Yeah, I actually think this is going to be where we head in the future. There was a small subgroup of the OUS study that they looked at that had at least a half a diopter difference in their refractive outcome. And those patients actually did have an expansion in their near vision. And I think that that's a really sweet spot. I think we just need studies that show that it doesn't change visual disturbance profile significantly. But I think that's going to be where the money is.
I think Ivo has a question. Ivo had a question. Ivo Ferreira has.
Hey, hi. Yes. First of all, to congratulate Sergio and Ashvin. I think they're making history here, and we're being part of history of history thanks to them. This is an amazing panel. Thank you, guys. I think it was amazing. We're learning, but there's 3 points I think they're very important here, looking into the future, right? The first one, Kathleen, you were talking about that sweet spot at 40 centimeters, right? Our patients are changing that reading distance because of laptops and smartphones. I would love to know what you think about that. The second thing, you know, Laureano talking about astigmatism and patient satisfaction. I think this is key here, right? If we're looking to new technology as VBT, is it patient satisfaction being measured the correct way? What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a very good point about where is it that our patients want to see the best as technology changes and their lifestyle changes. And I think, you know, that is one of the weak spots maybe of where, you know, intermediate has been in the past where we're looking a little too far out and near a little too close. You know, there's something in that 40 to 60 centimeter range that's really where patients are spending their life. You know, one of the nice things now is I don't talk to patients so much about near versus intermediate. You know, I mean, I think we used to spend a lot of time really thinking about that, and we had some choices that only really served their needs in one of those two locations. But now we have things that give a little broad distance or broad visual acuity in that range of distance. And I think in the future, it just simplifies what we do as well. We know where they want to see.
Quick question. So, sorry, there was somebody asking about a mix and match between Panoptis and VVT. Have you tried that?
I haven't yet because we don't have Vivity outside of the FDA trial yet, although it is FDA approved now. We should have had it maybe a little bit before, but COVID put the brakes on some early distribution of it. But certainly I have patients I am having wait because they have an eye that's compromised. They have an eye that's healthy. I think I'll put PanOptix in their healthy eye and Vivity in their more compromised eye and see how they work together. But it's going to be, you know, seeing how it goes and talking to the patients about the fact that this is a new approach, and I think it'll work, but we'll see.
Ramentera, you have a question. What do you normally use the duet technique with the monofocal in the bag and trifocal in the sulcus?
Okay, I use this technique. Is the trifocal in the sulcus is the Sulcoflex trifocal from Reiner. And I use this technique maybe in three situations. First one is when patients have had already a monofocal surgery with monofocal in the back and they now want trifocality. And the second one maybe is if I am not 100% sure the patient will tolerate the trifocality. Because if we have to remove an IOL, it's easier to do when the IOL is implanted in the sulcus than when it's in the back. And the third one, it could be when I don't have, but it's not frequent, when I don't have enough power of the spherical torical power. I can do a mix with the power of the in the back and in the sulcus one, and we can obtain the power that we want.
And another question, why only 20% of the American, 11% of the European, of the astigmatic patients receive toric IOL?
Money.
Well, money, yeah. Money, yeah. There are three main reasons, but the first in America and in Europe is the cost to the patient. And I think that here we can do anything. Maybe we can talk with the industry, but it will be an uphill battle. And the second one reason was the first is the money. The second one is not enough training. And I think that here we can do a lot of things. We can train our residents and we can do astigmatic webinar and all those things to make doctors feel confident managing astigmatism. And the third one was technology not available, but the first one is money. Yeah.
Okay, I think we have to close the session. Thank you, Ron. Thank you, Ivo, Shiraz, Ramentera, Kathy, and thanks for Ashfin and Sergi for all the heavy work behind the scene. Thank you so much. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you for being a fantastic panel. We look to the future.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Well, that was fantastic. And I think I learned so much from the premium IOL section. But the first things first, can all the panels, there's a lot of questions in that Q&A box. I really want all the panels, if they can actually go ahead and start answering some of those questions while they're at it. And meanwhile, I'll continue with the next session. And before we move to the next session, I wanted to tell everybody, we asked a question. to Priya Narang. And the question was, what technology are you looking forward to? And this is what she had to say.
Presenting here is the Advanced Vision Analyzer, comprises of a head-mounted device similar to a virtual reality headset, a patient response pattern, which is a handheld device, and an Android tablet that serves as a controller to perform, record, and analyze this program. The head-mounted device is lightweight, and it allows a high degree of flexibility in patient position. The HMD is battery-powered, has an adjustable headband, and records the patient's response after the presentation of the stimulus. During the test, the system obviates the need to occlude the fellow eye. The patient response pattern is connected to the HMD through a wire. After the given stimulus to be recorded as seen, the patient presses the button. The computer system then determines the test results with the recorded information. The test control device is a tablet that is connected wirelessly to the HMD, to the patient response pattern, and to the cloud server. The device is portable, does not need a dark room to perform the test, and can also be performed in supine position. To set up a test, the administrator initially logs in and pairs it with the headset, followed by input of details. The tablet has HMD details, settings, new tests, and reports. Our offers white on white perimetry with a stimulus intensity that ranges from 0 to 40 decibels, and the test is performed with Goldman-3 stimulus size. The test details can be set by choosing the eye that needs to be tested, followed by the test pattern that is either a 24-2 or a 30-2 program, or a test strategy that can be either a screening, full threshold, analyzer assessed, or analyzer fast. Other details that are fed into the system include personal details such as patient's name, age, sex, that help to retrieve the stored data, which is stored on the backend server. The clinical data on our eye is encrypted and is therefore secure. The eye tracking system tracks the pupil movement while the test is being conducted. Hence, it helps to check for fixation losses. The interpupillary distance can be adjusted. Refractive errors can be corrected. The printed test report consists of patient information, reliability indices that comprises of fixation loss, false positive and false negative, absolute threshold values and grayscale pattern, variant plot based on effect significance, and global indices that are compared with the normative database that specifically perform AHA. These are the various kinds of visual field effects detected in grayscale pattern.
Well, that's what Priya had to say about the technology that she's most looking forward to. We have a special offer from the ASCRS themselves for all the attendees of the WWCRS. This basically means the 400 hours of educational content that is available on the ASCRS virtual platform is now on a discounted rate for the World WCRS participants only. We would like and urge everybody over here to actually go ahead and sign up for this, because it's one click away for 400 hours of educational content that is galore that you would get in an actual ASCRS live meeting. From the videos to the live debates, as well as posters and everything that an actual live ASCRS live meeting has. Having said that, we should now move ahead with the polling question. And let's do the polling question. Can we have the polling question on, please? A small pupil, to me, should be managed mostly manually as much as possible, using pharmacological agent, Canabrava ring, iris hooks, Malaysian ring, the B-hex ring, or the APX. And we have 15 seconds to answer this, guys. Get going, get those fingers moving. And can we stop the timer, please? Can we also see the results? Iris hooks is the winner here. Now, we don't have iris hooks in this next panel, but let's see if we can move that needle to any of the other rings and other agents available. Can we close the share polling, please? Can we also introduce these great set of moderators, panelists, and speakers? Can we have the video?
Small pupil session. The coordinators, Boris Malyugin and Bruno Fontes. Guest panelists, Gaurav Yutra, India. Featuring speakers, Boris Malyugin, Russia. Manuel Nicoli, Argentina. Subin Beraturci, India. And Ehud Asiya, Israel. Organizers, Sergio Canabrava, Brazil, and Ashwin Agarwal, India.
Dear colleagues, it's my pleasure to be with you today and to thank my co-moderator Bruno and Gaurav for joining me for that session, and welcome to the small pupil session. I want to also thank Sergio and Ashwin for the great, fantastic event they organized and we are witnessing today. So let me start with my talk, and I will try to squeeze it into 600 seconds because the topic is quite broad. Intraoperative floppy iris syndrome. We know this is the syndrome consisting of 3 typical symptoms: floppy iris that you see that
Boris, it's kind of hanging.
Maybe the internet connection. Can we move along with another presentation?
Okay. Do you hear me?
Hi.
I think we have Boris back. Yeah.
Okay. So it was probably internet connection. So at what point did it stop? I don't know, but I just want to come back one slide back and to credit David Chang and John Campbell for introducing to our surgical community of this syndrome. And we know that there is a long list of drugs which is correlated with that syndrome. The pathomechanism is the thinning of
I think the major issue is internet connection, isn't it?
Yeah, it looks to be an internet issue from Boris.
Yeah. Boris,
could we
lost you? Do you think it's better to move along with another presentation?
I think
just...
Okay, so we'll come back to another one to Neil next time. I mean later on.
Sure.
Sure.
How is that now?
Yeah, you're back.
Okay, I can move on. So as shown here, this is a OCT study showing the thickness of the muscles, and this is the difference with dilator muscles in the healthy subject as opposed to the patient taking tamsulosin. So this is the also again treated patient having much thinner dilator muscles as opposed to control subject. So there is one more mechanism involved in that, which is related to the iris vascular dysfunction resulting in poor pupil dilation. So there are certain risk factors: gender, age, and systemic hypertension. Iris risk factors also including the pupil, which is smaller than 7 millimeters. There is also significant relationship between iris and axial length. The shorter the eye, the worse the situation. Also, we do have different corneal sizes. So there is not only the size of the pupil, but the ratio in between the pupil size and the limbal diameter, which is very important to keep in mind. IPS incidence varies significantly from 1.1 to 12.6%, and this is most recent studies showing in a substantial amount of patients from 947 to more than 4,900. So we see that the overall incidence is from 9 to 12.6%, which is quite significant. So IPS can be graded as mild, moderate, or severe based on the number of symptoms that we can see. So the development of IPS is quite quick because it has been reported even after 48 hours after tamsulosin intake. So that's why there is no reason to stop the medication before cataract surgery. IPS is associated with increased ocular inflammation, posterior capsule rupture, anterior capsular tears, vitreous loss, iris trauma, and cystoid macular edema. And the rates of posterior capsule ruptures range from 7 to 12%, which is much higher than we can see in the usual setup. Iris changes, these are the early slides, and we can see might be quite substantial with the loss of substantial amount of iris tissue. So what medications we can use? Atropine is quite useful as a preoperative medication, as well as non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs. They help us to reduce the issues with pupil dilation. Also, we can again judge by the pupil size, and the patients having pupil size less than 7.5 millimeter having fourfold increased risk of having problems intraoperatively. Intracameral mydriatic agent is the way to go, as shown here. By injecting mydriatic agent, you can actually not only dilate the pupil, but strengthen and improve the biomechanical properties of the iris. Surgical technique, we need to use elongated corneal incisions. We need to not to be very forceful with our hydrodissection, lower fluidic parameters, and trying to keep the irrigation flow above the iris plane. And this is another advice from Steve Arshinov, who is using soft shell breach technique, where dispersive viscoelastic is coating the cornea. Viscoadaptive is located in the center of the anterior chamber, and above the capsular plane there is a VSS field space, which helps to manipulate within that area. But you have to keep in mind that you need to keep the fluidic parameters very low, flow less than 20 ml minute, and aspiration 200 millimeter hydrergia. Clinical results are quite variable. We know that IPS group provide us longer surgical time rather than in patients that do not have any problems. What about the devices that we can use? Iris hooks in a diamond configuration, when one of the hooks is located behind the below the main incisions, is a very helpful combination. Also, the Malugin ring, which is reported in 2008, was the first report was by David Chang, who was using that in 30 consecutive IPS cases. So the use is quite straightforward. You inject here, you see that the pupil starts off quite big, but as soon as viscoelastic was leaving the anterior chamber through the paracentesis, as shown here, we see that the pupil starts to constrict, the iris starts to incarcerate into the site for incision, and the surgery becoming more and more challenging. So this is the time when you may consider stop and then think what device you should be using here. And in that case, I was planning to use the pupil expansion ring, and shown here, you see when I injected viscoelastic, again, pupil become quite big and quite wide. So it was quite typical for these eyes. That's why I like to use bigger ring, which is 7 millimeter rather than smaller one. Iris retaining points, which are 8, shown here, help you to keep the iris in place. And this is the modeling of the floppy iris syndrome. As you can see here, the billowing and buckling of the iris in small pupil situation is quite intensive with a very small buckling pressure. However, when you keep the iris in 8 points, as it happens with the pupil expansion ring, there is a little bit of buckling in between these pupil fixation points. However, the whole situation is quite stable. Pupil expansion rings show to be very useful in most of the IFIS cases. They require less operating time, do not require extra incision, provide stable pupil during the surgery, and minimizing postoperative pupil deformity. And it also decreases the surgical time, both in consultants and trainers alike, as compared to the iris. So that takes on average 10 minutes longer. So the surgery is much longer with iris hooks. So there are several other devices should be mentioned. BHEX will be discussed later on during the surgery, but there are also other devices that are available on the market. So to summarize my talk, there are several critical aspects, including stratification of risk, preoperative prophylaxis, intraoperative treatment, surgical technique, and intraoperative management. But you have to keep all these take-home messages in mind when dealing with that type of patient. And I thank you very much for your kind attention. Bruno, we can hear you. Please switch on the microphone.
I'm sorry. Congratulations on your excellent talk. Thank you for sharing such knowledge, and thank you for developing such an elegant instrument that help us all around the world with small pupils. I mean, it was amazing. It's before Malyugin ring and after Malyugin ring our approach for small pupils. I think it's better to go along with the next speaker, and then we have some time to discuss later. Do you agree?
You might have to, Boris, you might have to stop sharing your screen, Boris.
Okay.
Next speaker.
It's on the top, it's on the top orange button.
Okay. Dr. Manuel Nicoli.
Yes, hello. Hello, everyone.
We'll do that for you. Hold on.
And then we have time to discuss with Dr. Gaurav Luthra, that is with us already. And then of the talks.
Can I share my, okay. Hello, everyone. Can I share my, yes. Can you see the slide?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Thank you for the invitation. I'm very honored to be here. Thank you, Dr. Ashwin Agarwal, and thank you, Sergio, for the invitation. I'm Manuel Nicoli from Buenos Aires, Argentina. I'm going to talk about iris expansion rings in flax and shallow anterior chamber. I'm going to talk about the Canabrava's ring. It's a ring of PMMA with an opening of 60 degrees. It was built in a 3D printer. This has an intervallar diameter of 6.3 millimeters, a vertical length of 0.4, and 2 small hooks at each end, and 7 eyelets with an upper slot and a lower slot. Each slot, each eyelet has a 0.28 millimeters for manipulation for a Sinski hook. This is for insertion and removal of the eye with minimal incisions. As we said, the height is 0.4 millimeters. You have here the big eyelets and the smaller eyelets. The big eyelets go over the pupil edge and the smaller eyelet goes under this pupil edge. Other rings has more height between 0.7 and 0.9. They're not aligned, they're alternate eyelets, so that gives you a wavy configuration for the iris to hook on. We're gonna see here a video of how we introduce. We use a McPherson forceps or similar. Then we use the Sinski hook to put the ring. First goes the central eyelet, and then we move to the lateral eyelets to centrate the ring. And as we do this, there's some tension in the iris, but it's going too perfect. And then we put the hooks to finally set the ring. We're gonna see some different surgical situations using this device as to see the efficacy, the stability, and the security of the ring. Here we're seeing a very hard cataract surgery with a lens pressure into the ring, and you see no movement on the ring. Then we're gonna see a posterior capsular rupture in an eye with a vitrectomy eyes, and some sectorial iridectomies and colobomas you can use, and posterior synechia. You can use them in those cases. And here we see an Argentinian flag case with the ring on, and see the stability of the ring at the end of the case. This is how we disengage the ring, and we move forward to the anterior chamber, and then we pull it out with the McPherson. I think the two advantages of this kind of ring we can set is for the shallow anterior chamber. As we said before, it's 0.4 millimeters of height. Other rings have 0.7 and between 0.7 and 0.9. So we reduce the endothelial contact throughout the procedure. Here we see a case of a very small pupil. As you can see, we are introducing the ring with viscoelastic. The capsule was stained with blue trypan, and then we do the exact procedure to put the ring on. As you can see, we got a very good pupil to do our case. The other thing we think it's very useful is for the flags, for the femtolaser cataract surgery. Here we have the ring put in a calyx procedure. As we can see the red arrows, there's the ring. This is a video from Bernardo Tombach from Brazil with a case of Canabrava ring. The utility of this, if we use an incision of 1.4, we put the viscoelastic, then we wash it out with VSS. We irrigate the incision. We don't use a suture. We check the pressure of the eye, and we go to the femto. These are 4.7 Rexis with a calyx machine. You see here perfect, all the ring in position, and the case began as usual, and you can see the perfect Rexis and the final of the surgery. And here's the publication in 2018 of Sergio Canabrava with 30 cases. Actually, nowadays, the Brazil is commercially available. In Europe, it's available, but with the pandemic, it's already stopped. I began using this ring last year. I was the first surgeon in Argentina to use it. And I think it's an excellent option in our management of small pupil. And I want to thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nicole. I think it's a nice talk and nice presentation, and also I think it's worth to discuss a little bit about the femto and pupil expansion rings. So, do you? My first question: do you leave viscoelastic in the anterior chamber when you do that, or you prefer to remove it?
With the femto?
Okay, yeah.
With the femto, I forgot to tell you, but I don't have any experience with the femto in using the ring with femto. So I use it in normal cases, not with femto yet.
Okay, because.
But I talked to but I talked to Sergio and Dr. Bach, and they try to take all the viscoelastic off the eye and put some BSS, and then do the femto.
Okay, because I do have some experience with different ring, but also with femto. So my usual technique, I leave viscoelastic. I use dispersive viscoelastic, and I leave it in the anterior chamber. And also, I like to place the suture. After implanting the ring, I like to place one suture, because even if I'm using 2.0 millimeter incision, I still, with viscoelastic in the chamber, I still can see that after suction applies, there is a viscoelastic that is going out. So I think it's safe to mention that whatever device you use, but do consider placing the suture to make your incision watertight when you do that before femtosecond laser application.
I think that's a good tip, because we use a 1.4 millimeters to insert the ring. They don't put the suture on it, but it's a very good point you're saying about the even though there's a suture there, some viscoelastic is going out.
Yeah, that's right. And also the other thing is, sometimes when you place your incision a little bit to limbal, so then there is a little bit of issue with the laser, because the bleeding from the limbal vessels can go and obscure the view. So that is also have to keep in mind that you need to be quite corneal and clear corneal, really not to touch the vessels to avoid bleeding, because otherwise it may be quite challenging to do that. But otherwise, excellent. Congratulations with that great experience and great stuff. We do. How about my co-moderators? Bruno, do you have anything to add, or Gaurav?
Yeah, wonderful. We have some questions, a lot of questions about using the NSA drops, even with those rings. I think they are useful for controlling inflammation and pain during and after the surgery, and maybe preventing macular edema. Don't you agree, Dr. Lutra and Dr. Malyugin?
Frankly, I don't enjoy. I do a lot of femto-assisted surgeries, and I don't enjoy putting any of these devices for the small pupils. I have done a couple of cases using this new, as Boris showed, with the phenylephrine drops. So we've used phenocaine, which became available to us in India some time back. You can put it through a very micro incision, except that it may not last that long, because we can have a constriction. So frankly, I think I would love to try, and I think B-Hex also goes in from a much smaller incision as well. But
yes,
right. So anyway, so that's my thought. Yeah.
As for my experience, there were quite a number of publications showing that non-steroidals are quite helpful in controlling inflammation, and especially they are very useful in femtosecond laser-assisted cataract surgery, and we always use them in that cases. And there were some publications about intraoperative floppy iris syndrome, I mentioned them in my presentation that by using non-steroidal, you can actually decrease the need for any pupil expansion device because the pupil is maintained much better. There are also pharmacology to be mentioned apart from the intracameral phenylephrine or epinephrine. There is another medication which is called amidria, which is injected into the bottle with BSS. And by continuous irrigation into the anterior chamber, the concentration of the drug is maintained throughout the procedure. So that's why it's quite a good idea to maybe use that in these cases. Although I'm not aware about any publications related to amidria use in complicated small pupil cases, but in regular cases, it showed to be effective.
Wonderful.
Okay.
I think it's better to
Bruno?
move to Dr.
Okay.
Next panelist, next talk.
Yeah, so thank you. So it's going to be, I'm Suren Bhattacharya. Pupil. Yeah. So Dr. Deepak and Dr. Nito for the wonderful videos. The BHEX is easy, safe, and very affordable. The 75 micron profile is 1/10 the thickness of other devices. Hexagon with notches and flanges. The housing presents the preloaded device at the incision, and the BHEX 23 gauge forceps advances it through the incision. As alternate flanges are tucked under the iris, the pupil expands. The iris bends at the notches, while the BHEX remains in a single plane. Notches are disengaged and the device is removed through the main incision. In fact, the BHEX can exit through a 1 mm side port incision, which no other device can. So, how do we choose our pupil expander? Chang and Campbell published that unlike non-elastic pupils, the IFIS pupil immediately snaps back when stressed. Small pupils, two types, elastic, non-elastic. The elastic pupil can be stretched like a rubber band and any pupil expander would work. Non-elastic one is like a string and can only be torn or broken with a strong, bulkier expander. The choice depends on how you wish to tear the rigid pupil. With two Kuglen hooks, the hair-thin BHEX allows a lot of space in the AC for instruments. To tear with the pupil expander, it has to be bulky and that would obstruct instruments. The rigidity of the pupil should be checked as soon as we make the paracentesis. As the AC is inflated with BSS, the elastic pupil expands. On the other hand, a rigid pupil does not. The pupil hardly enlarges when BSS is injected. Once the fibrotic band is torn by a bimanual stretch, the pupil now expands and it is easy to use any pupil expander. This is a very simple test to differentiate between a rigid and elastic pupil. We are all skilled enough to perform phaco with the assured 5.5 mm pupil that the BHEX provides. Publications have endorsed its usefulness in difficult cataract and vitreoretinal surgery. This is an elastic pupil. As alternate flanges are tucked, the pupil expands to 5.5 mm for easy phacoemulsification and IOL implantation. The flanges are untucked and the BHEX literally walks out of the main incision. And here, the BHEX is removed easily through a 1 mm side port incision, which no other pupil expander can do and is very useful in tight situations. A rigid pupil and a hard cataract. A bimanual stretch makes it easier to tuck the flanges of the BHEX. As we can see, the 5.5 mm pupil is more than adequate to emulsify even this hard a cataract. And once again, removal is so easy. This is a rigid pupil with a fibrotic membrane. Stretching was not attempted and only the fibrotic membrane was removed. When the pupil still remains rigid, bimanual tucking of the flanges using the forceps and the iris hook or Coughlin hook helps engage the BHEX with ease. And we have such good visibility for surgery. Despite being rigid and fibrotic, we have a nice round pupil. This is an extremely shallow anterior chamber, and we can see how the 75 micron thin BHEX can easily be tucked under the pupil margin. Despite the shallow chamber, every step is so controlled and safe, and it allows so much space for the phaco probe and other instruments. The BHEX never comes in the way of IOL implantation. Here, the pupil becomes small as phaco is commenced. A little viscoelastic lifts off the iris from the capsular axis. The uniplanar design and open notches ensure that the capsular axis is not engaged as the flanges are tucked. As the flanges are tucked and advanced, there is instant confirmation. And now we are back to our comfort zone. If you are looking for an easy device that allows a lot of space in the anterior chamber, the BHEX is your go-to pupil expander. If you're looking to tear a fibrotic pupil, you will need a bulky Mulligan or APX. This could be easily done with Coughlin hooks. The choice is yours. Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Suvin.
Thanks, Boris.
Thank you very much, Suvin, and thank you for the nice talk. And let's listen to the next speaker, Dr. Ehud Asia from Israel.
Yes, good evening from Tel Aviv, and thank you for the invitation to participate in this interesting session. And I would like to share with you our clinical experience with the APX. I would like to first acknowledge that I do have interest in this device. And this is the APX, which is a different pupil expander. It's different from the other either hooks or rings. And the principle of this device is the same that one would intuitively do when he wants to open up a rubber band using 2 hands and 4 fingers. This is what we would do, creating such an X motion. So we apply the same principle into the patient's eye. And these are the 2 devices that we use, the 2 APXs. This is the APX. It's a plastic device. It has a nitinol spring here and a blunt tips on both sides. And it is used using 2 designated forceps so that the nurse can actually load them for the surgeon before he's going to open the pupil. This is how it works. We make 2 19-gauge incisions on the opposite sides and then insert the device inside the eye and slowly open up when the tips are located behind the pupil. So this is one technique. We are going from the inside out, from the center of the lens to the periphery, open up, release the device, and this is it. And note, there is no other instrument inside the eye. All the manipulations are done from the outside. We also place them a little bit skewed so that it creates kind of a trapezoidal shape opening so that the wider base is facing the surgeon, so there is more space for the instruments. Pulling it out simply by using the same designated forceps, close and pull out, and the pupil regains its normal shape. And this is the other technique, going from the outside in. We can actually open up the whole thing, even release it, put some more OVD between the capsule and the iris, and then going from over the iris to the center, which make it a little bit safer, not touching the capsule in any circumstance. So we do the same on the other side, open up and then put the 2 blunt tips behind the iris through the pupillary aperture, and removal is done by the same forceps, pulling it, closing and pulling it out. So let's see some complicated cases, and this is a case of an hypermature cataract with fibrous tissue. We have some bleeding from the synecholysis, 2 19-gauge incision on the opposite side. The APX is inserted, open up, making sure that the tip is located behind the pupil, and just slowly release it and do the same on the other side. And then we can see that this patient is after irradiation from melanoma. It is a fibrous capsule that we need to cut with scissors. So we must have a very good and stable and large pupil. We cut the capsule with scissors, take it out with forceps to see the very dense, hard nucleus that we can remove by direct visualization and implant a posterior chamber lens within the bag. And following the removal, the pupil again is going down a little bit and regains its normal configuration. This is a patient with an eye premature cataract with a Morganian cataract. She was blind for 15 years. We could not see anything into the eye. And after staining of the capsule and aspiration of this milky material, we can see this is actually a Morganian small cataract and a calcified capsule. We remove the nucleus and then put the lens in through this small pupil. Next case is a scleral fixation of a subluxated intraocular lens, and we do need to see where the needle goes in behind the optic and then goes out in front of the optic, and then eventually the pupil is perfectly centered. And the last case is a patient with pseudoexfoliation and severe phacodonesis. So we could manage to remove the lens material. However, the capsule was very phacodonetic, so we had to stabilize it using a capsule stabilizing device, and I prefer to use the capsular anchor. Now, this is done with a 9-0 ProLens. Today, we do it with a 6-0 ProLens with a flange technique, which we think it's much simpler, and then remove the two apex devices with a designated forceps. Very simple to remove, just close and pull it out. So our clinical experience includes cases with pseudoexfoliation, IFIS syndrome, uveitis, mature and hypermature cataract, closed angle closure with nanophthalmos, coloboma, scleral fixation, iris fixation, persplantar vitrectomy, subluxated lenses, actually the entire variety of small pupil. And we find that this device is very effectively dilates the pupil, both in cases of routine and on complex cases of cataract. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ehud. I think this is the time for a short discussion. We have a couple of minutes. So my first question to Suven, because we do have a range of devices. There are different ones. So your device is planar, and it is very good because it can be inserted through the small incisions, 1.0 in your case. However, at the same time, planar device makes it a little bit more challenging to engage the iris. So tell us about your tips and tricks, how you do it more efficiently.
Yeah, thank you, Boris. Can I have my mic on, please?
Yes, we hear you.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Can I have my mic on?
Yes.
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
Yes. So yes, so it's a very thin device. So and you're holding so it's a very thin device and it's a very flexible, resiliently flexible device. So and you're holding it with the forceps. So you've got total control over it, and it doesn't hurt to bend the iris because it's fully reversible. And it really is a very intuitive device. It does not require any great learning curve. It's very simple. So you have a couple of videos and you can go ahead and do it. It's not very difficult to engage at all. And in fact, like you said, you probably talked in a lot of your presentations, and I've also done that. It's always a good idea to lift off the iris a little bit with a bit of viscoelastic under it so that it's easy to tuck in whatever, whether it's the scroll, your scroll, or eye-ring pocket or a BHEX flange. It's much easier if you lift it off with a bit of viscoelastic.
We have some questions regarding if is it reusable, the BHEX?
Well, it's officially sold as a single-use disposable device, and it costs a lot less than Boris's ring. So I guess you can use it, but then there are people who have reused it. But reuse, there's a problem with the device is that it spoils its mechanical properties. So I would caution you against reuse. It's sold as a single-use disposable device.
I would like to ask Dr. Lutra and Dr. Boris Maluji. There are some physicians who have some difficult times to putting those rings when you have already done the capsulorhexis. It's much easier to put them on without performing the capsulorhexis. What are the tips that you use to put and position these rings after you started the surgery and capsulorhexis is always done?
Yes. Should I take it first, Boris? Okay.
Yes.
So personally, if I have made a rhexis and if I have a very shallow chamber, I will usually not use one of the rings. I'll prefer to go with the iris hooks. And then of course, you can put viscoelastic under the iris and typically go from the side, lift up the iris a little bit and then engage one of the iris hooks. And then it becomes much easier to put the other iris hooks because you can start from the area where you have the first hook in place. For ease of insertion, I really like Boris's ring, the Malugin's ring. I enjoy the B-hex as well because it comes out so nicely. It's nice and easy to put in there. But for I use both of them pretty often. So for very small pupils, I would probably go with the Malugin's ring, and I enjoy how easily it can be inserted. Once I got the forceps which Suven makes, which he's recommended, it's become much easier to use the B-hex as well. But if the pupil is really small and fibrotic, as he showed, you want to stretch it. Otherwise, the B-hex may not, engage as well. But so that's one small limitation which I do find. But removing it is so much easier. But I think both rings have an amazing, they've really made life so easy. And for insertion of the ring, if I had to do it after the rhexis was made, I would probably put some viscoat, in the far end where under the iris a little bit, and make sure if the capsule is stained, it makes life so much easier, because I've had a complication once where we did manage to catch the rhexis in a very small pupil, and we were lucky to get away without having a broken one. But yes, I would caution people to be very careful if you have a rhexis in place to be sure that they didn't catch the capsulorhexis.
I agree with what being just said. And I think when you try to expand the pupil when you already done capsulorhexis, whether you use the ring or whether you use the hooks, there is a risk of catching the rhexis margin. And obviously, you have to keep that in mind. And at least in my hands, I think it's a good idea to lift the iris a little bit. However, you have to be still vigilant about that possibility. So what I do, I insert the Malugin ring, and then I try to move it left and right, up and down. And if I see that it's moving easy, that it's definitely not catching the rhexis. But if it is restricted in movement in some direction, for instance, vertical, then I understand that here is the area when I catch it. So as soon as you can recognize it, it's not a problem, because you disengage the scroll and then engage it once again. And I do believe the same will be applied to more or less any other ring. Maybe Suven's ring having more planar structure, having a little bit less risky of in that case, rather than any other rings that are having such kind of a gap in between the two fixation elements. I must say like that.
If I can add something. If I can add, this is exactly why I showed the second technique, going from the outside in, going from the surface of the iris. And this applies not only for the APX, it applies also for any kind of a ring. If you have a problem with the capsulorhexis already in the eye and the pupil is small, you can put the ring on the iris, ring, apex, or hooks, and then from the peripheral goes towards the center, so you would not catch the edges of the capsulorhexis, and you could do it step by step and very slowly. So in this case, you would not rupture the capsulorhexis.
Yeah. So
great tip. Yeah.
So the difference I find between the B-hex and Malugian, when you have a situation after the capsulorhexis, is in the Malugian ring, we have to, when we're using it with the injector, the control is a little remote. So we are not actually able to hold the scrolls. It would be wonderful if you could hold the scrolls and kind of direct it right over there so that we are absolutely sure that we are not engaging the capsules. With the BHEX, what happens is, since we are holding the flanges with the forceps right at the flange, so the control is a lot more. And as you tuck the flange under the pupil margin and you advance it towards the periphery, the confirmation is immediate. Like if you have a resistance, you can see that the capsulorhexis has been engaged. So you withdraw and go to at a planar slightly higher. So that is an advantage with the BHEX. And as you said, it's a planar device, so it goes in much easier. And you can see the notches which are flat and staring at you.
Yeah, and maybe I will add a few words that if you're a bit concerned that you will catch the capsulorhexis, I think it's a good idea, at least for the Malugian, is to inject the ring, place it on top of the iris. Do not try to engage it at the same time, and then do it one by one with an instrument. And I think it's quite safe and easy to do that. My question goes to a hood. So I've seen that you were working at 12 o'clock. So you're sitting at 12 o'clock. And of course, you have a good exposure of the iris on the exposure of the eye on the side. So any hints for the surgeon, and many surgeons are sitting temporal, at least in Europe and US. So any recommendations with your device, how you handle that when you're sitting in the other direction?
Yes, this is correct. My personal preference is to do it at 12 o'clock. I just like to do it instead of bouncing from one side to the other. But I did many cases in which I said temporal approach. In this case, in order to position the APX, I just ask the patient to look a little bit down. So let's make it easier to put one side, and then you ask him to look a little bit up, or move it with the forceps. But it's not a concern. I mean, it does need a little different manipulations, but it does go easily just as well.
Okay, because sometimes with the hooks, when the eyes, the eyelids are tight and the narrow, so we like to cut them to make them smaller. So which is obviously not possible with that device.
This is correct, but hooks are very long, much longer. So this is why they sometimes usually extend beyond the surgical field of the eyelids, but the APX is much smaller.
Okay, good, great point. Thank you.
It was a great session. I think we have the time, don't we, Ashwin?
We do have some questions on the website. I'm not sure we will be able to answer all of them.
Yeah, we might have to close the session as the other session is waiting.
Yes,
Thank you, everybody.
1 minute, I need to move you on, but first, I like to say, Servin, Ehud, Boris, I'm a great fan of all of you because it's difficult to invent in ophthalmology. And Boris, I like to say, the iris expansion ring was divided before Malugian ring and after Malugian ring. Sorry, but me, Sylvain, and Ehud came after. And Boris, thank you for congratulations for your ring. And I was inviting Nicole to this session because the rule about my boss is Ash. Ash told me only one talk for the speaker. Then let's go to invite Nicole because Nicole has a great experience in Canberra ring. And Bruno, thank you. Bruno is now the president of the Brazilian Society. Garov, thank you to be here too. And let's go to the next session. Thank you to be here today.
Thank you.
And
bye.
Let's go to the next session. This session for today. Now we start with Bill Trattler with the question, please. The question, number 1. The same question, and Bill will answer us about the question. The video, please.
Hi, I'm Bill Trattler from Miami, Florida. And this has been a very challenging time for all of us. But thankfully, we're starting to see some improvements. We're seeing more patients come back to our practice to see us for regular exams, and we're starting to see surgery volume increase. So things are moving in the right direction. The technology I'm most excited about is a technology called the light adjustable lens. Now that we're starting to see more patients and doing more surgery, this is a technology that I think is going to be a major part of my practice going forward. I had a chance to work with this technology just prior to COVID-19 hitting, and my results so far have been quite promising. I've been able to take patients who've had previous refractive surgery or other issues with their eyes, and then after surgery, make adjustments with the light adjustable lens, and they've all done beautifully. They've had wonderful visual outcomes. So I think this technology is very promising. I think our ability to end up on target has improved over the years, but the light adjustable lens allows us to really end up with really fantastic visual acuity and visual results. So far my patients have been extremely happy. As a surgeon, I've been very happy, and I think this is a technology that we can all be excited about. Thank you.
And before the polling question, I have a question for Bill. I don't know if Bill is here, but Bill, when you invite us to Miami, please, guy, invite us. And now the polling question, please. The polling question: to manage my keratoconus patients, multiple choice. Here, you have 50 seconds. And while you answer it, the next session is amazing. Is the moderators Renato Ambrosio, Susan Jacob, great surgeons in the road, and a great team, a great panelists, a great speakers. And after the questions, thank you guys to stay here with me and to Ash. It was hard work to be here. And let me see the answer. Okay. The answer I have heard then out. I prefer on cross-linking. Okay, number one, I cross-link DALK and ALPK. Okay, I really don't know nothing about keratoconus. I know only about challenge case. Then I want to read now everything about you. Please, the session video to present the speakers and panelists.
Keratoconus management session. The coordinators: Susan Jacob and Renato Ambrosio. Guest panelists: Jack Parker, USA. Juan Battle Jr., USA. Juan Abad, Colombia. And Emilio Tosis, Switzerland. Featuring speakers: Nicolas Cesario, Brazil. And Barha Capezzi, Switzerland. Organizers: Sergio Canabrava, Brazil, and Ashwin Agarwal, India.
So hello everyone, and a very, very good day to all of you, depending on which time zone you're all in. I would like to, at the outset, congratulate Ashwin and Sergio for organizing this wonderful worldwide webinar on cataract and refractive surgery. I think it's been going great so far, and that's a testament to the hard work that they put in behind the scenes. We are going to be starting off this session with keratoconus, and me and Renato have lined up a great panel and great speakers for you, and I'm sure we're going to have great fun in this session. I'm going to start off with the first speaker, Renato, who is going to speak to us on paradoxes in keratoconus. Renato needs no introduction at all. He is the president of the ISRS, and he's a very, very well-known person in the field of keratoconus. He's got his name all over on machines, in speaker panels, in conferences, and over to you, Renato.
Thank you very much, Susan. So first of all, congratulations to Sergio and Ashwin for this great program. My talk is on paradoxes on keratoconus management. It's very important that we understand always that we have some financial disclosures, including Oculus. I have to acknowledge my collaborators in Brazil and also in Portugal, especially the group in Brain. And this is very important to remember the history. We know keratoconus as medical field for 150 years ago, but it was on the 80s to 90s that we have a huge boom on the number of publications as seen in PubMed, and this is related to refractive surgery. The role of refractive surgery on diagnosis, treatment, even surgery and clinical gives us some interesting ideas if this is the ally or the enemy. Why? Because ectasia, biomechanical ectasia, especially because of refractive procedures, we have the combination of corneal resistance and the impact from the environment, and the understanding of any cornea may develop ectasia even when you don't have any risk factor that you can identify. It's important to tell people not to rub the eye. If you want to avoid ectasia, that's the first message. And we evolved this messaging into the understanding that eye rubbing or scratching or sleeping over the eyes would aggravate keratoconus and eventually cause ectasia. This is not exactly the same thing. When we talk about ectasia risk assessment, we have evolved tremendously. We have gone beyond, but not over, the detection of mild cases of keratoconus, and also going beyond but not over topography, which is front surface evaluation of the cornea, into the domain of understanding ectasia susceptibility. We have multimodal imaging, and it's going to be very important to understand early diagnosis, prognosis, staging, detailed follow-up, patient orientation, and treatment guidance. This is the first case we've seen ectasia susceptibility. This patient had LASIK in the left eye, and LASIK in the left eye developed ectasia. Right eye had no surgery. She would qualify for LASIK, but based on abnormal tomography and biomechanics with the ORA, she would be identified as ectasia susceptible. It's important to understand that this patient is still stable today and would qualify eventually if you see some different color code scales for the front surface from Placido and from Scheinflug. You may see some abnormality or eventually some suspicious findings, but it's very much borderline. When you combine data with tomography and biomechanics, as the work done with myself, Cynthia Roberts, and Paola and Ricardo Vinciguerra, which is available on the combination of Corvus and Pentacam, you have abnormalities easier to be detected. We are aware of the validation studies. Even though the TBI has the best accuracy than any other parameter, we have some accuracy lower than our previous first publication. And we have developed the optimization study in which we have a larger number of patients from a larger cohort of international centers. This is important to understand the role of artificial intelligence, and just seeing all these great talks from the previous sessions, I see the manifest of artificial intelligence in ophthalmology, especially in cataract and refractive surgery. And this is something we have done that to improve, even for a little bit improvement on the clinical keratoconus, but this is much more seen in the mild cases. But you see some cases down here. These cases down here, they are not keratoconus unilateral. They are truly cases that have secondary ectasia, and this can be unilateral based on the consensus. This is the best example. The patient did very well with the corneal ring in the right eye. The left eye was uncorrected 2020 and moved to London, and everything was normal in the left eye based on Dan Reinstein great work, including epithelial thickness and other tomographies like the Damian-Gatinel and Saad score. The tomography and biomechanics is still stable 7 years after the procedure as the BED-002. When we manage keratoconus, it's a paradigm and a paradox. We broke the paradigm when I did my fellowship in cornea. We only had PK, a penetrating keratoplasty. We broke this paradigm and we created paradoxes. We do surgery today to halt ectasia progression and for visual rehabilitation, but the main paradox is that keratoconus surgery should not be a refractive procedure. Another thing that we should talk about as a controversy is when to do cross-linking. I do believe that we should consider the pros and cons and eventually perform cross-linking when we have progression documented or very high risk of progression based on the multimodal imaging. We should understand the difference between therapeutic and refractive surgery. Therapeutic aims to improve visual rehabilitation, and refractive surgery to reduce the dependence of glasses. They are not the same. They share a lot of similarities, but if you compare the similarities on the DNA of a cat and a lion, it's kind of the same situation as refractive and therapeutic surgery. So the paradox goes to the domain of understanding that keratoconus is a new subspecialty in ophthalmology, and Sergio Canabrava told he doesn't know about it because he does know only about complex cases. Every keratoconus case is a complex case, Sergio. So welcome to the team. Evolution, paradoxes, and paradigms are related to refractive surgery. Understanding when, why, and how to do surgery in these patients. We need individualized medicine, and eventually patient education is a must. That's why we started the campaign on the Violet June, which is starting, by the way, on Monday, and I welcome all of you to help us. And this goes very much into the core domain of medicine, which is heal sometimes, relieve often, and comfort always. Thank you very much for your attention. Have to unmute.
Thank you, Renato. That was a really great talk. We are going to have the panel discussion at the end, and I promise you, we have a great panel here for you as well. We have Jack Parker from US, we have Juan Battle from the Dominican Republic, and we have Juan Abad from Colombia, and we've kept more than enough time for this panel discussion. Next on, we have Farhad Hafezi, who's going to be talking on cross-linking. And he, of course, again, doesn't need any introduction. He's been doing seminal work in the field of cross-linking, and he is a very, very well-known name indeed. And I think he's just come out with his new thing, cross-linking on the slit lamp, which I'm sure he's going to be sharing with us here as well. And I think he just received his machine, the first machine at his home, which I saw on Facebook. Congratulations for that, Farhad, and over to you.
Dear Susan, dear Renato, thank you very much for the kind words. And to both of you, thank you for including me in this session. And Sergio and Ashwin, you have put together an amazing 2 days. So my congratulations to that. I will be focusing in the next 5 minutes on cross-linking for keratoconus. These are my financial disclosures. Now, the topics I would like to cover are on one hand, epi-on cross-linking, and on the other, are there ways to increase access to cross-linking technology on a global level? Looking at a cross-linking reaction, we learned in the early days that we need light and riboflavin, and we learned a few years later that we also need oxygen for everything to occur. And when you look back at the epi-off cross-linking procedures in 2007, 8, and 9, everybody was trying to accelerate the whole treatment. And we also learned that accelerating epi-off cross-linking works to a certain level. We can go from 30 minutes to 5 to 10 minutes, but going even higher does not really work that well. Why? Because oxygen becomes the limiting factor. Now, this was epi-off. Everybody would be excited to have epi-on that is working, and I think we are right there. If we look at epi-on cross-linking, what needs to be done to make epi-on cross-linking work? Let's revisit these 3 factors: UV light, riboflavin, and oxygen. For the UVA, this is quite straightforward. The epithelium blocks 20% of the UVA, so we need to increase the fluence to compensate for that. For example, from 5.4 joule to 7.2. Check. Getting the riboflavin through the epithelium into the cornea took a few years to do it really reliably, and I believe that iontophoresis is a good way to get the cornea saturated with riboflavin. So this would be a check too. The third element is a little more complex, the oxygen element. If you look at what we know is, we showed a few years ago that no oxygen means in the ambient air means no biomechanical increase at all. So oxygen is essential. And in the case of epi-on, we know that the epithelium really is very thirsty for oxygen, and it just takes away a lot of the oxygen before it even reaches the stroma. So putting all this into the equation, a number of attempts were made to make epi-on cross-linking work despite these obstacles to overcome, mainly the oxygen availability. In the beginning, there was pulse light. And pulse light means that you switch on and off the light to allow the oxygen to replenish. Pulse light alone is not enough. And we were able to show this both in the laboratory and clinically. If you only pulse the light, you still have trouble with your epi-on procedure. Then the next attempt was, well, if we accelerate too much, we run into trouble, right? So what if we slow down the reaction? For example, not do 30 minutes like in Dresden protocol, but let's try 60 minutes at 1.5 milliwatt. And guess what? combining this very slow irradiation with iontophoresis-assisted epi-on worked nicely. So this was just almost as strong as Dresden protocol. We had almost no differences in all our measurements. Now, taking this together, how can we do successful epi-on? We could theoretically use this very slow irradiation, but honestly, do you want to spend 1 hour in the OR to do a cross-linking procedure? Probably not. So this is just theoretical. The second approach would be to increase oxygen availability, and this has already been done recently by boosting the oxygen in the ambient air. For example, using goggles around the head of the patient. This should work, but what I do not like about it too much is it adds another complexity to it, more technology, everything gets even more expensive. So the third question is there a more intelligent way to combine everything? And I think there is. And there is an intelligent way to combine all the factors we know so that you can use normal air, no additional oxygen, and still have successful epi-on. It's like pieces of a puzzle. If you use iontophoresis and if you use the irradiation pulsed, high fluence, and slow, relatively slow, then all the pieces come together and the epi-on puzzle is solved. And this is no fantasy. Basically, this is the Cosimo Mazzotta epi-on protocol, and Cosimo has just published his 3-year follow-up doing this in the JRS. So just look it up. He published it, I think, 2 or 3 weeks ago. So he uses 13 minutes with 18 milliwatts pulsed light, high fluence, slower than all other epi-on protocols, and he uses iontophoresis, and he has a demarcation line at 290 microns with normal air, no additional oxygen. I like this a lot. Makes it easy. Easy is good. Simple is good. The next thing is all these fancy protocols and technologies do only work for a fraction of people on Earth because only those who have access to infrastructure, like an OR. So indeed, we have been working for years to get access to those who are in the greatest needs in remote areas of the world and in underserved regions. And as Susan has mentioned, we are very happy and proud that we finally managed to solve this puzzle too. And the spin-off of the University of Geneva, Imagine, has just released the CI device for cross-linking at the slit lamp. And if you want to join us in Zurich, hopefully we will be able to hold this meeting physically because it's in December only. Please come and join us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ferry. It was a brilliant talk as always. We really look forward to understanding more on the role of doing epi-on cross-linking. And this is a brilliant work. Thank you very much. It may be changing the algorithms on doing surgery early on in patients because it's going to be definitely safer. It's a pleasure to introduce my next speaker is my friend, Nicolas Cesário. He is a colleague from Brazil, a very talented cornea surgeon, and he's going to tell us about his experience about Bowman's layer transplantation.
Well, hello everyone. I want to thank the invitation and congrats Sergio and Ash for this great event. So I'm going to talk about Bowman's transplantation, and I don't have any financial interest to disclose. So Bowman's transplantation was first described in 2010 for persistent corneal haze after PRK from Melis's group. And their group also described this year as an onlay procedure to manage herpes ocular scar and to stabilize visual acuity fluctuation after radial keratotomy. But most of the publications and the main indication is as an inlay procedure for advanced progressive keratoconus to stabilize ectasia and preserve vision with contact lens when cross-linking is not indicated anymore. And almost all publications are from Dr. Melis's group together with Jack Parker that is here with us today in this session. And their first publication for keratoconus was in 2014. And they showed the surgical technique as a manual lamellar dissection to implant the graft in a mid-stromal recipient pocket. And in the first publication, they showed 10 eyes and didn't have any complications, with a mean CMK decrease around 6 diopters, with improved contact lens fit and no loss of contact lens visual acuity. And they were all stable with 12 months of follow-up. Then they published 22 Bowman's transplantation, where 2 they had intraoperative perforations, and one of them needed to undergo a PK. So they had 20 eyes analyzed with a mean follow-up of 20 months, and they had 2 eyes that showed progression. And then they published 17 eyes out of those 20 with 5 years of follow-up. And they didn't have any change in visual acuity between 1 and 5 years of follow-up. The estimated success rate was 84% because they had 2 that progressed and 1 that had a high drops post-operatively, but none of those cases need a PK or DALC. They just had contact lens refitting. And they also published the donor tissue preparation as a challenging procedure because around 30% of tissue loss they achieved. So the donor tissue preparation, the manual preparation, requires precise surgical technique and a lot of patience, as you can take 1 or even 2 hours to prepare the grafts. But in 2017, they published that it's possible to perform the preparation with femtosecond laser. It gets a little bit thicker, but it's possible to prepare a femtosecond laser. So in the same year, we decided to perform our first case of femtosecond laser Bowman's transplantation at Sorocaba Eye Bank. We got a very advanced case for our first case. It was a patient with less than 200 microns of corneal stroma. So here we're preparing the graft with the femtosecond laser. So you can see it's a very
talks, but you beautifully summarize this very interesting concepts on Bowman's transplantation. So the next speaker is my co-moderator, which I am very honored to introduce, Dr. Susan Jacobs, with her very innovative technique on CARES.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Renato. And I will start my presentation now. I hope I can be heard. Right. So CARES refers to corneal allogenic intrastromal ring segments. And this is a technique that I started basically for keratoconus. And I must say that I have a patent pending for special devices and these segments. Sorry about that. I'm sorry about that. Right there we are. Okay, so the reason I came up with this idea was because of the large number of complications that you can sometimes see with intacts in terms of extrusions, intrusions, MELS, necrosis, stromal necrosis, infectious keratitis, and so on. And really, if you can even have a reported rate of up to 30% rate of complications with synthetic implants, especially when you're putting them in the more severe keratoconuses. So this was basically the concept that I came up with, which is a double-bladed trephine, which can be used to cut donor corneal tissue into a ring of segments. So basically giving you allogenic tissue segments. Here you can see how the procedure is done. I have taken a donor corneosteal rim and I take care to remove all the epithelium as well as all the endothelium from this donor rim. That's the double-bladed trephine that's seen, and you take this and put it on the donor stroma and punch this ring of stromal tissue from which all epithelium and endothelium has been removed, and then you cut it into two halves. And I've designed these simple instruments from cataract surgery set, and you can just dip it in riboflavin if you're also combining with cross-linking, and just push it into those femtosecond laser dissected channels as you see here. So there you can see one of the segments implanted, and the second segment can also be similarly implanted, and you can see you can just slide it along and push it into place from the second incision on the other side. And then if you're also planning cross-linking, you can continue with that. Here's a postoperative appearance of a patient, and you can see well-placed segments. I generally prefer to place them at 50% depth, which does very well for me as far as results go. And here's a patient again seen on broad beam slit lamp illumination. You can see very quiet eyes and very well-placed segments, very inert segments there. So we know that the disadvantages I already mentioned, not just the complications of synthetic implants, but also the fact that they cannot be implanted in very thin or very steep corneas. And you also need to implant them deep to be able to get that amount of safe tissue above the cornea. And despite that, sometimes you have complications. However, with CARES, you can avoid all these complications. You can put them in advanced cases because it's allogenic. You can also use it in mild and early cases. You can really use it in a large number of patients. You can put arc segments up to 360 degrees, and you can have even use of CARES, not just in ectatic diseases, but also for the treatment of MELS post-intacs. As you can see here, this patient has a post-intact melt. And you can see that the extent of melt is generally larger when you actually come down to it, because some of it is generally covered by epithelium. I've made this CARES segment and cut it out and used it to fill that defect, and basically put a combination of anchoring sutures and bridging sutures to hold it in place. And here's the postoperative appearance after suture removal, where this patient has one intact and a beautifully placed CARES segment, which has solved the anatomical as well as the topographic problem for the patient. Post-operatively, I put them only on simple routine cataract post-op medications. And a question that I'm always asked, does it reject? No, it really, there's a very, very low level of rejection. And because of lack of time, I'm not going to go into the reasons, but if you go through my papers and my presentations on this, you can see this. And even in the worst case scenario, if it does reject, it really doesn't matter. Now, this video I have taken from Jack Parker, who's one of the panelists here. And it's a beautiful video which shows one of his cases where you can see the change brought about by the CARES segment that he's implanted. That's the pre-op over there. And you can see that the cornea has really flattened. This is the post-op, post the CARES implantation, showing a really beautiful outcome. That's again pre-op in these patients. So some of the topographic results, I'm going to go very fast through this. You can see the flattening, centralization, and decrease in curvature of the cornea. Here you can see a patient with a difference map. I'll just ask you to concentrate on the difference map. High astigmatism, this is pre-op, and showing a reversal of the astigmatism. Here you can see the difference map, again, a single segment inferiorly placed arc, which is giving you a lot of flattening and decrease and regularization improvement of the topography here. Again, a single segment showing up to 15 diopters of flattening. So depending on the thickness that you're placing, as seen here, a thicker segment gives you much more flattening, and a thinner segment you can get less flattening. So you can use your nomograms in terms of arc segment length, in terms of thickness and depth of implantation, as well as the optic zone. Here's a patient, 2 eyes, 1 eye CARES implanted, beautiful flattening, the other eye only cross-linking, and not much significant change, showing you the results that can be got. Many patients where you can actually avoid dialg by doing cross-linking, got up to 18 diopters, 20 diopters of flattening with CARES. Here's an anti-segment OCT showing very stable, well-placed segments. We've published this in JRS with our first pilot study of 24 patients. Now we have more than 140 patients now. We had improvement in all parameters. Also remember, it's reimbursable in, at least in India, we have it under the reimbursement scheme. And also being a tissue transplant, you can also just process it as a lamellar graft through your eye bank, and therefore you should still be able to get reimbursement for this. So to conclude, CARES really has a lot of advantages in terms of stability, simplicity, safety, reversibility, adjustability, and ease to perform. And with that, I'll come to the end of my talk. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Susan. This was really great, really great. So we have seen that the paradigm of PK that we had by the end of the 90s and early 2000s, now we have different transplants, we have different procedures, we have cross-linking, when and how to do it, and we have a great panel to discuss about it. So to start, I'd like to invite my friend, who is the president of the Pan American Society of Ophthalmology, the PanCornea, Dr. Juan Abad from Colombia, to give his ideas on issues related to eye rubbing, contact lens, and cross-linking and corneal rings problems. Juan, please give us your insights on these topics.
Okay, thank you, Renato. Thank you, Susan. And I want to also congratulate Ashwin and Sergio for an amazing meeting. I want to comment on a study we have done since 2012, following a group of 24 children with keratoconus. Actually, Renato has been part of it. We have an average follow-up of 3.8 years, and we're using the Belin ABCD progression display. We back-tested the patients from 2012 to 2017 using the same criteria, and then we prospectively evaluated the patients since 2017 when the software came out. We found a progression rate of 33%, 1 in 3, for keratoconus, and 3.6% for keratoconus suspects. And none of the patients lost a single line of best-corrected visual acuity. And interestingly, the K-max had a lot of intrinsic variability, where in stable cases, it increased up to 1 diopter in 27% of the patients, just to return to normal. So maybe we should use like more robust software or parameters to diagnose progression in keratoconus. Also, I want to talk a little bit about the intracorneal rings. We just did a study. It's being evaluated for publication. Out of the 97 intakes that I implanted from 2006 to 2011, the patients were doing fine, refractively, and so forth. And then at 8 years, we started to see the septic necrosis that Susan was showing in her videos. And then by 12 years, we have a 9.2 extrusion rate, which is utterly high. And I'm very concerned about the doctors in the US because that's the only intracorneal ring segment they have. I haven't seen that. We haven't seen that with triangular segments, with Kerr rings and so forth. So in the US, they have a big public health problem, I think.
Great. Thank you. Thanks, Juan, for your comments. We have Jack Parker here from US who has done 2 of the procedures that were discussed in this talk. One is the CARES and one is Bowman's membrane transplantation. Jack, would you please give us your inputs on this, on both of these procedures? Jack,
you
unmute
can
yourself.
hear me now. Yeah.
Yes.
One of the very nice things about CARES is the operation is extremely simple and familiar, which is to say it is a slight modification on a surgery that a lot of people are already doing, which is intacs. So there is very little learning curve to this operation, something you can start with tomorrow. That is not the way it is with Bowman layer transplant. The first question with Bowman layer is, where do you get the graft from? It's not widely available in the world, which means you're probably preparing it yourself. Nicholas, who always makes me so jealous because he's such a brilliant guy and a wonderful surgeon. I see him operate, I'm jealous every single time. One thing that he doesn't show you, I think, is that the femtosecond laser doesn't easily prepare the graft. So even though he makes it look easy, you really have to fiddle with the laser to get it make the graft exactly right. If you're preparing the graft by hand, it takes hours and it's very tedious, delicate work. And then after that, Bowman layer transplantation is very successful at stabilizing keratoconic progression, but it doesn't improve vision. So on the one hand, you have CARES, which is an operation that you can do tomorrow, and it improves the patient's vision tomorrow. They see better. Bowman layer transplantation is difficult to prepare the graft, it's difficult to do the surgery, and doesn't improve the patient's vision, but is very successful at stabilizing otherwise runaway progressive keratoconus. So I think they're different surgeries for different indications. Bowman layer transplantation is a more advanced technique. CARES is a more fun technique because you can do it tomorrow and the patient will see better tomorrow and you really feel like you can do something new.
That's great, Jack. Thank you. Thanks. Nicholas, would you like to give us some inputs on how you can make BMT a little more easier for those who are interested in starting it off?
Well, as Jack Parker just said, the manual technique is really challenging and it takes a lot of time to prepare the graft. It's at least 1 to 2 hours to prepare the graft, and you have 30% of losing the graft. So we found that with femtosecond laser is a little bit easier, but still you're working with a really thin graft. So you can still lose the graft. We had 2 grafts that we lose when preparing out of 52 preparations. So having the femtosecond laser, we'll get it easier, but as Jack Parker just said, is not an easy procedure to perform. But I really think that it's a lot more reproducible when you have the femtosecond laser to not only prepare the graft, but to do the pocket dissection for the recipient.
Great, thanks. Thanks. Renato, you want to ask something?
Yes, it's beautiful that we have different options, but when you have many options, sometimes you get more confused than to have the benefit of having all these options. So we need some studies and prospective studies on when to do it and how to do it. One of the things that Nicholas mentioned, it was when you cannot do cross-linking, and I know that Hafezi and Emilio Torres has done a tremendous work on thin corneas. So I'd like to ask Emilio on his experience with very thin corneas. Eventually, we can have options instead of doing a Bowman's transplant and just modifying the technique, as you just said.
Well, thank you. First, congratulations, Canabrava, Ashwin, Susan, and Renato for organization of this amazing webinar. So Renato, as you said, we are now treating thin corneas a bit different than Bowman layer transplantations because we have developed in Zurich the sub 400 protocols, a protocol which allow us to treat thin corneas. And the thinnest cornea we've treated so far was as thin as 214 micra. Also, keratoglobus patients have already been treated with this protocol. But I would like to focus a little bit as well as the Bowman transplantation, because many people have pointed some properties about Bowman's layer over the past decades. And we also performed a study to evaluate if the biomechanical properties of a thin layer of cornea with or without Bowman would have an impact. And we did not find any difference in the stiffness of a cornea and that flap with or without Bowman. So in this sense, our hypothesis is that any thin tissue other than Bowman's can also have a role, but not only Bowman. And we also did an estimation. So considering that a cornea would be 30% less stiff, a keratoconic cornea would be 30% less stiff, and the Bowman layers would be 3 times more stiff, we would need 6 layers of Bowman to compensate the impairness of the keratoconic cornea. Or if you use only one Bowman's layer, we would need one Bowman's layer with 12 times more stiff properties than the corneal stroma. So in any sense, these would be compensated by a Bowman's layer, the keratoconus impairment. And our hypothesis is that this tissue implantation may have other mechanisms of actions like fibrosis, other inflammatory reactions, and these can also be demonstrated with DSMS implants by Melia's group as well, or onlay implantation. So this is a very interesting point, and we will learn a lot in the future for sure.
Thanks, Emilio. I think that was a very good point that you made, that cross-linking is possible also in thin corneas, and Farhad has this very good technique of what do you call it, Farhad? I'm sorry.
Sub 400.
Sub 400, yeah. Sub 400 techniques, and we've personally been doing the CAC exit techniques also for thin corneas. Juan Battle from Dominican Republic has a new technique which he won the first prize for at a conference recently, which is very, very interesting. Can you tell us something about that, Juan? And you've also done some of the techniques that were shown here in the seminar. Maybe you could discuss that as well. You have to unmute yourself, Juan. You have to unmute yourself.
Of course, Susan, thank you so much for inviting me to be a part of this panel and wonderful world webinar of cataract refractive surgery so far. Amazing panelists and speakers. What we're doing now in Dominican Republic, we started around spring last year, was the use of a UV light emitting contact lens device that was placed on the cornea and was able to remain centered despite the movement of the eye. And before that, we were applying another contact lens, which was a scleral contact lens, which served as a reservoir to put the riboflavin, which was preserved in BAK. So even though we call it an epi-on procedure, the sloughing, partial sloughing of the corneal epithelium is what allowed this riboflavin to penetrate through to the cornea, which we verified that was completely through, and then applied 30 minutes of light. And it was not pulse, it was just direct continuous light emitted for 30 minutes for a total energy of 7.2 joules. And we were able to show what was amazing about this, we had patients that were in Kmax greater than 58 diopters, and all of them stabilized or showed regression up to 3 diopters in Kmax. And this was, for us, a great surprise because when we chose these patients, we said, choose them among the severe range that we would typically do a different kind of procedure other than cross-linking, as has been shown by other experts in the world. And yet we showed that we were able to include now more severe cases as cross-linking patients and have good stabilization and good visual improvement results. About 87% of them improved in non-corrected visual acuity and 50% improved in best corrected visual acuity. And all of them showed a flattening of both their central Ks and K max without progression.
That's great.
The other thing I wanted to mention a little bit about the advantages of this kind of cross-linking is that now you can basically sit patients down instead of have them being supine. And the next step in our research is going to be using a new type of preservative which has a peptide that is able to make the epithelium shrink rather than slough off. And thus it'll allow riboflavin penetration without losing epithelium, and thus allowing patients to not experience any pain and have much more rapid visual recovery. And once we have this, I think that is the holy grail of cross-linking that is totally painless with rapid recovery and more like a refractive procedure, but giving you the advantages of stabilization long-term.
Juan, thank you. Juan is a brilliant ex-fellow from Bascom Palm. His ideas are really great. He's also one of the people around the world now who's performed CARES and has had very good results with it. Renato, you are going to be, you've brought about this concept of the Keratoconus June month, and that's really important, I think. And I think maybe you should give us a message about what you would like people to specifically know about this.
Thank you, Susan. The concept of the Violet June started when I saw one patient that has a huge problem because of the misunderstanding, the disinformation, as we say, about the disease. And he was an athlete, a jiu-jitsu fighter, and he was in his 14 years old, and he was eager to keep his training and doing his championships and being a professional. And some of the doctor gave him the idea that he could not do it because he would need a transplant. First, he did not need a transplant at that time. He was able to do well with a cross-linking procedure and then a scleral lens. But when he was in that marathon of lack of understanding, he was saying to the parents, I'm going to get blind, but I'll keep myself training and keep myself with my sports. So you see how much bad the misinformation is. So the Keratoconus awareness campaign started just because of this understanding that we all share this idea of telling people about the disease so that they can understand, live better with it. And the message of telling people not to rub the eye is a secondary message, but turns to be very important because it's a consensus that it's bad for you. It can be very bad for some people and for some other people not so bad, but eventually we agree that this is not a good thing. So the 2020 year is the year of ophthalmology. And we were with a high expectation for the Violet June 2020. And we got to be a 2020 year as a Nostradamus prediction hundreds of years ago that would be even a more important year than ophthalmology. But we had the month of June also coming as the month that we are coming back to the life, to the new normal that we, as we say. And so I do believe that this is all kind of connected. And the idea is that we should promote that people should not be rubbing the eye, and we have to tell people that keratoconus is a disease that is now a subspecialty. We have to understand that it's not refractive surgery. So we have a lot to do, and I see all this panel with great colleagues and great ideas, great minds, excellent surgeons, so that we can do better and better for the patients with keratoconus. And this is all connected to the willing to have a better world. That's what is coming in the next years to come with ophthalmology. I saw the new things that we are seeing in terms of lyrics for refractive surgery, new tools for visual field tests with all the dimensions of the artificial intelligence that we can improve our lives. So I welcome all of you to join the Violet June campaign. Just promote the idea, telling people that keratoconus is a disease. Don't rub your eyes, and promote your work along with that. It's not a message from one physician from Brazil. It's a message from ophthalmology to the world, even beyond keratoconus.
Excellent. Thank you, Renato. And I think with Corona and people specifically not touching their eyes, I'm sure the eye rubbing is going to automatically come down a lot in the world, and hopefully we'll see a decreased incidence of keratoconus in the future. So I think your message was good. Keratoconus patients have a lot to look forward to in terms of the range of treatments that are available today, right from the very early cases to the late cases. Thank you so much, each and every one of you speakers and the panel. We had a lovely discussion on keratoconus. Thanks for all your inputs. And thank you, Ashwin and Sergio, for organizing this for us. And I'll hand the mic back over to Ashwin and Sergio. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan.
Thank you.
Guys, really thank you to be with here today with us. Let's talk about the tomorrow. Tomorrow have more 4 important talks, 4 important sessions. You have to start a scleral fixation. Then I will have the mix session, refractive surgery, and challenge case. And tomorrow we start the same time, but today you have problem with Zoom. We pay for a Zoom with 3,000, 5,000 people, but when the people try to in, it's not working. Then tomorrow, if you don't can to go in the Zoom room, go to the website or go to the YouTube. Today, you have more than 4,000 people around the world during our event. And it will be online, the YouTube and the Facebook. Thank you, this amazing meeting. Thank you for this amazing speakers, coordinators. Thank you for Ash to make it real to Agarwal team. I can say the Agarwal team is amazing. You don't know how the Agarwal team is amazing to work. See you tomorrow.
Thank you, people. Thanks a lot for being here, and we'll see you tomorrow.